It's Saturday night in Colorado Springs, and Memorial Hospital's ER is unusually calm. Nurse Wendy Cunningham takes the opportunity to catch up on some paperwork.
When you work late at night in an emergency room, you see all kinds of things, but you're never really prepared for what's going to happen. She looks out and sees a white car pulled up to the front door, and it appears as though they're pulling somebody from the back seat of this car.
People just screaming for help. I mean, total chaos.
Across town, Lt.Joe Kenda is enjoying movie night at home.
It's a rare thing in my world to have a couple of hours of peace and quiet.
I can't believe you want to watch this.
Shh. I prefer mindless movies. I have enough mysteries in my life.
It's Kenda.
We're about to reach the conclusion of this film. And I'm thinking, can you wait 5 minutes? No, we can't wait 5 minutes. We need you right now.
Tell me how it ends.
Be safe, hun.
When I got to the hospital, everyone in the ER waiting room is distressed.
How you doing?
Hey, Lieutenant.
So what we got?
A group of young kids came in the ER a little bit ago. 4 of them. 2 have been shot. Doctors are working on them now.
The first victim is an individual 21 years of age named Earl Pickett. He has suffered a grazing gunshot wound of the back. The second victim is a 21-year-old male whose name is Van Lee Terry.
Van has been shot in the chest and is in critical condition.
Who are the other 2 in the car?
That's Van Terry's siblings, Jan and Dan.
Van, Jan, and Dan.
They're triplets.
The officers tell me they didn't come there in an ambulance. They came there in a car.
Where is it?
Out in the ambulance bay where they left it. Said they'd been involved in a drive-by.
All right, thanks.
So I walked outside to look at the car. There's a great deal of blood inside the right rear of the car. There's so much of it, it has drained out onto the street, which tells me that Mr. Van Lee Terry is probably going to be unsuccessful in that fight. That's probably where he was sitting.
It's a lot of blood.
There's a bit up here, too. Not nearly as much, but a bit.
That would indicate that's where Mr. Pickett, the grazing wound victim, was sitting.
Kenda and fellow detective Brian Ritz turn their attention to the trajectory of the gunfire.
There were 2 gunshot holes in this car near the right rear passenger door. The window is shattered, so some gunfire went through that window, which of course shot Mr. Terry and also shot Mr. Pickett. Based on the position of the gunfire, the likelihood is great that they're running next to each other and one person in the car is shooting at the other car.
Oh, hello. We recover a .380 caliber weapon from under the front seat.
It's under Pickett's seat. Careful, it's still cocked.
There's a magazine in the weapon, but the magazine is empty.
Anytime that you find a weapon at the crime scene, you're going to start questioning what part does it play in the shooting.
It's entirely possible that the victims in the car fired first and initiated the encounter.
Been fired?
It's empty. Doesn't smell like it.
Recently fired weapons have a distinct odor. There's no detectable odor, so why would somebody keep a gun cocked with no bullet in the chamber?
Let me head inside and check on the victims.
All right.
When I go back inside the hospital, the doctor comes out of the trauma center.
Doctor,
How are you?
well,
No. We did everything we could for Mr. Van Terry, and at the end, he just passed away.
how's Earl Pickett doing?
Oh, he's actually fine. Just came back from his room, let him know about his friend, but now I have to go inform Mr. Terry's siblings.
It's never easy, is it?
It's not. It's all right.
Thanks, Doc.
He gives them the news that Van did not survive.
It's all right.
You always hear about all these bonds between twins or triplets, and there must have just been like a part of you was dying.
So you've got to let that moment settle. There's no point in talking to them right now.
Instead, Kenda decides to speak with Earl Pickett.
Can you give me some of this? Lieutenant Kenda, very sorry for your loss. Just need to ask you a few questions.
Earl may be more composed than Van's siblings, but he's still visibly shaken by the loss of his friend.
8 months ago, Van was living in Texas, and he became a father, and he came here to further his education so he could be a good provider for his new child.
Can you tell me how you came to be in the vehicle with the Terry siblings?
Hey, Jan's my girlfriend. We were just gonna go see a movie with her brothers, but we missed it, so we were just driving around listening to music.
Who was driving?
Jan was, because I had been drinking.
So it's your car.
Yes, sir.
I asked Earl to tell me what he remembers about the shooting itself. He says that they're driving down Platte Avenue when this car pulls up next to them.
He's been shot! Jay's been shot! Go to the hospital! Go to the hospital!
Did you get a look at the gunman?
No, the windows were tinted.
Earl claims he has no idea why someone would shoot at them, but Kenda's not sure Earl's telling him the full story.
So, Earl, why was there a gun under your seat?
It's my gun. I rarely use it. I just have it to keep in the car.
He's trying to minimize his connection to this weapon. That speaks volumes to me.
Well, let me ask you this then. Why was it cocked?
I don't know.
Well, Earl, I think you do know. But we'll let that go for right now. So I said, all right, thank you. We'll talk again.
I'm gonna go talk to everyone else.
Wait. Hold on.
Oh, well, now we're getting somewhere, maybe.
Go ahead.
All right, look, not long before we got shot, I was up to this fast food joint to use the bathroom. On the way in, this guy called Jen a whore, so I yelled at him.
Knew you wasn't little hoe.
Hey, back off.
Hey, yo, who you talking to, bro?
I'm talking to somebody's family.
So what's up?
Then we left, and that was it. But he seemed pretty mad. I think he may have followed us.
Earl says this blackmail. He's wearing blue rubber bands in his hair.
And your gun? Where was that when all this was happening?
It was in the car, man.
And now Earl is pedaling as fast as he can on his live bike. Well, I'm a soldier. I can't afford to get in trouble. I'll get kicked out of the army. Nah, 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 nah.
All right, get well soon.
I know that Earl Pickett is not telling me the whole truth, but I also know that we're going to get to the bottom of this. And whoever did this hasn't heard the last of it yet. So we're investigating a drive-by shooting.
He's been shot!
We know that there's been a disturbance that led to this shooting.
So what's up? What's up? No! Come on, no!
We know that Van Lee Terry is dead. And I also know that Earl Pickett's not completely truthful with me. What I don't know is who's in this other car. And that's our focus now. We go to this fast food restaurant and we see if any of the regulars are around.
How you doing?
Just fine, officers. How are y'all doing?
Were you here earlier tonight?
And he tells me he's a regular. And he was here and he's been here all evening.
What's your name?
Playboy. That's what they call me.
Playboy.
He thinks by calling himself Playboy, he can attract girls. Well, all right then. How's that working out for you?
All right, Playboy. We understand that this place had a bit of a crowd earlier tonight.
They were here to see me. I was supposed to fight this dude who crossed me. Word got out. Can't have none of this.
Playboy boasts that at least a dozen people had gathered to watch him take down his rival.
You want something? You want to mess with the Playboy? The Playboy!
They're all anticipating that this fight's going to happen. Their adrenaline's pumping. They want to see what's going to happen in this fight.
He's not here!
But the other guy never showed up, obviously out of fear of Playboy, and so therefore he's a winner.
Anything happen after that?
Not really.
Bull. About the guys in the white car? Listen, we know there was a fight here tonight.
Oh, that one. Some dude with braids started getting into it with those people in the car. One of the guys came out of it and he took it up a notch.
The guy, who he describes as in the right front seat, goes to the trunk, takes out a handgun, and cocks it. Well, my opinion is that's our man Earl, brandishing his .380 auto that isn't loaded.
But he didn't shoot it. He just, I don't know, everybody scattered, then he got back in the car and left.
This guy with braids, you know his name?
I've never seen him before.
Playboy doesn't really know these people. Either side, he doesn't know Earl Pickett, he doesn't know anybody else.
Thanks a lot for all your help.
Yeah, no problem.
The conversation with Playboy proves Kenda's hunch that Earl Pickett hasn't been telling him the truth. But it doesn't get Kenda any closer to identifying the shooter. Now his only hope lies with Van Terry's siblings.
So now I think there's enough time for Jan to settle about the loss of her brother.
Hi.
How you doing? Mind if we come in and talk to you about what happened?
She tells me about the family and that Van has gone back to college, take care of this new child he has in his life. She's still very distraught about the loss. She repeats what is said by Earl, most of it. She says that the disturbance happens at the restaurant.
Some guy made some slick comment to me. Like he was trying to make my boyfriend mad. It's a black guy with blue rubber bands in his hair.
Who you talking to? Bring him talking to somebody that
Come on.
So what's up? What's up, man?
Come on, no, let's go. Let's get out of here. We didn't try to start anything.
What?
That guy, he initiated everything. We got out of there as fast as we could.
What about the gun?
What about it?
She knew that he was in the military, and just something as simple as that could get him in a lot of trouble, so she was trying to protect him.
After pursuing her a bit, she admits that Earl did go to the trunk of the car and take out a gun and brandish the gun.
Come on, bro. What are you
Okay, that's what escalates this. That's what initiates the shooting that happened a short time later.
About the car that fired on you guys when you were driving down Platte. Did you get a good look at it?
No, not the license plate. It was just a dark car with tinted windows, and the back window was down, behind the driver's side.
Things she's told me that I find interesting is the shooter's in the back seat of the suspect car, and somebody else is driving.
There's more than one person involved in this shooting.
Again, we're sorry for your loss.
Detectives now know the shooter had at least one accomplice, but their identities remain a mystery. So Kenda reaches out to another potential source of information, his fellow Colorado Springs police officers.
Whenever police question an individual or suspect about one crime, we sometimes wind up intercepting information about another. That's because criminals often can't help but brag to one another about what they've done, even the killers.
It isn't long before Kenda catches a break.
What's up?
Hey, Lieutenant.
We receive information from one of our robbery detectives that while working on another investigation, as a confidential informant, is able to tell him he has some information about a murder that occurred in Colorado Springs.
So the CI says he's talking to this guy about this burglary, and the guy tells him that before they did the burglary, they were involved in this argument at the fast food place downtown, and they shot up a car right after that. Well, no.
So he tells me we need to talk to this guy. Mike did the burglary. Mike's partners did the shooting.
Confidential informants operate on a cash basis. They sell information. There is no loyalty among bad guys. None whatsoever. They would roll over on their own mother if it was to their advantage.
The detective tells Kenda that operating on the tip from their informant, his men found a cache of stolen goods in the home of a man named Mike Phillips and arrested him an hour ago.
All right, let's go talk to him.
It's an odd thing, but it happens all the time. You have a murder case that is absolutely at a dead stop, and one little piece of information comes into your hands, and now we are hitting on all cylinders, and I'm feeling pretty good. So now here we are. We've gone all this way in this case without much good, solid information. Now we have an informant who's telling us about a burglary.
The burglar in question, Mike Edmonds, supposedly has the scoop on Kenda's drive-by shooting, and he's already in custody.
We can flush Mike down a toilet, and the only thing that's going to save him is to tell me what he knows.
Here you have some information about homicide for us.
If I give you the killers, you gotta let me walk on these robberies.
Mike, let me explain something to you. Right now, we get enough evidence for you to do a hard time for these burglaries.
If you tell us what you know, there is at least a chance that some judge might look kindly upon you when it comes time to sentence you.
All right, fine, I'll talk. But I had nothing to do with this. I just overheard my boys talking shit about it.
He explains that before conducting this burglary, he met up with two friends who'd helped him in the burglary. They were Matt Gorman and Ronnie Wilcox.
I heard there was a drive-by earlier. That was y'all?
Yeah, bro, that was me and Ronnie, son.
According to Mike Edmonds, Matt and Ronnie told him they were in the car with the shooter, a man by the name of Robert Ziegler.
Who was the driver?
They said it was some girl named Sue Klein. She's Robert's girlfriend.
Robert
Ziegler.
What's Ziegler's hair look like?
He's got little knots in his head. He ties them with blue rubber bands. Really. So now, our man, who in the past was only known to us by the color of those bands, is Robert Ziegler.
So Robert Ziegler? He's out on parole.
Robert Ziegler is 23 years of age, and he has been arrested 36 times in the last few years. 36 times.
He's actually on parole. That's something to our advantage because a person on parole has to make routine contact with their parole officers.
Yes, can I speak to Mr. Anthony, please?
His parole officer, Tony Anthony, considers Robert a major offender, and he pays attention to him. So he becomes crucial in finding him for us immediately.
Okay, we'll meet you at 4 p.m. sharp. Thanks. Bye.
I'll get the fugitive apprehension team ready. What's the rendezvous point?
Within hours, Kenda has the CSPD SWAT team assembled just a few blocks from Robert Ziegler's house.
Here's what we're gonna do.
When you're dealing with a potentially armed suspect, you want to arrest him outside. If you try to take him in a house, he knows where his weapons are and you don't.
With the help of Ziegler's parole officer, Tony Anthony, Kenda has devised a plan to lure Ziegler out of his house.
We're going to let Anthony make contact because parole officers make unannounced visits, so he would not be alarmed by the appearance of Mr. Anthony.
Okay, so I knock on the door and tell him I need to talk to him outside?
That's right, and as soon as he's outside, I'm gonna give the go signal and these guys are gonna grab him.
The last thing I say to everybody, remember, pay attention.
All right, this guy's probably got a gun, so be extra safe.
Do what you know how to do. I don't want to lose anybody to Robert Ziegler.
Okay, Anthony, go ahead and make contact.
Yo! Hey, Robert, this will just take a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Come on, step out here.
Whatever. I'll be back, y'all.
Go, 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 go!
You set me up! Put your hands behind your back!
He's not resistive. He's not even verbally abusive. I think he's a little shocked that we found him as quickly as we did.
Go ahead and take him downtown. Put him in interrogation room.
When Robert's taken down to headquarters, right away he says, I wasn't involved.
I don't know why the hell y'all got me in here. I don't even know what y'all talking about.
That's interesting, Robert. There's a whole lot of other people who know exactly what we're talking about. Like your buddies Matt and Ronnie.
And he just looked at me.
We know that Sue Klein was in the car. She's your girlfriend, right?
Yeah. Was this her idea? Did she hand you the gun? Because I'm thinking about charging her with murder also.
Didn't say anything for a minute or two.
She was the driver. That's it. I was the shooter.
You go from Mr. X and a complete mystery to this guy you're sitting 3 feet away from and he's telling you he's the guy. It doesn't get any better than that.
I was just trying to scare him.
When you shot directly into the car.
Excuse me? Well, you scared one of them to death, Robert. That's a big problem.
Now feeling the pressure, Robert Ziegler gives Kenda a full confession, which allows him to piece together the events that led to Van Terry's death.
All right. Stay put.
What happens is, they're at this fast food place.
Look, where'd he go? What's up?
He ain't got none of this.
This car pulls up, and for whatever reason, Robert says something.
I can talk to somebody about it.
Come on. So what's up? What's up? Hey, come on.
And he gets a reaction, which is why he's doing it. What he doesn't expect is that our man Earl pulls a gun. Now Robert is angry.
I got something for you.
So they go to Ronnie's house, he gets a gun, and they go out looking.
Find these motherfuckers tonight.
According to Robert's statement, his crew spent the next half hour searching for the white car. Around 11 p.m., they finally spotted it.
Make a left up here. Yeah, turn up here, turn up here. Turn up here. Pull up beside him, babe. Inside.
I don't think he can even see who he's shooting at in that car. I don't think he cares.
Oh! Yo, there!
He's throwing lead because he's mad.
With the events of the shooting now in focus, Kenda and his men begin rounding up Robert Ziegler's accomplices.
Robert Ziegler ended up pleading guilty to second-degree murder, was sentenced to 76 years in the penitentiary.
As for Ziegler's accomplices, all were convicted of accessory to murder. Ronnie Wilcox was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Matt Gorman received a 14-year sentence, and Sue Klein received 9 years.
Earl Pickett could have been charged with brandishing a firearm, which is a misdemeanor. We did not do that.
Had people just walked away, none of this would have ever happened.
Young people tend to get themselves in trouble over little or nothing, and it can lead to tragic results. Someone may respond in a way you least expect that could end your days.
Coming up, a family's nightmare turns into a scene of horror.
This is everyday people and how this level of incredible violence visits upon them. And horrific. It's December the 10th, 1984. It's about 7:30 at night. And I'm leaving late again, as usual. And I just want to make sure everything's where I can find it again in the morning.
You got that autopsy report? Whoa, don't mess things up.
Mess things up?
My desk had stuff everywhere. I knew where everything was, but it literally was everywhere.
It's Kenda. All right, we'll be right there. Bye. I forget that other case. We just got a double homicide. Let's go.
Kenda heads over to the Western Meadows Mobile Home Park, a part of town rarely visited by the Major Crimes Unit.
How you doing? So what do we got?
One victim here in the driveway, multiple gunshot wounds, 20-year-old Anthony Carroll. They pronounced him dead at the hospital.
Anthony Carroll had just moved to Colorado 8 months earlier to be closer to his older brother, Melvin.
And the other victim?
There's a young female in the bathtub. She's got multiple wounds in her chest, and they say she's got several in one leg.
How many gunshot wounds does she have?
None. She was stabbed.
Really?
It's very unusual for one perpetrator to use two different weapons.
And now who is she?
She's Sherry Bradley. She's also 20 years old. She's the girlfriend of the victim in the driveway.
Sherry had a baby that was 16 months, a little girl, and she had chosen to move in with Anthony several months before.
The relationship between the two victims presents Kenda with a grim but familiar scenario.
When you have two people who have been dating and now both are dead, it almost always is a murder-suicide.
Did Anthony Carroll stab her to death in the bathtub, walk outside and shoot himself?
Now, what about Anthony's injuries?
He had 2 gunshot wounds in his chest and 1 to the head.
Well, that certainly takes away suicide. No one shoots themselves 5 times, particularly twice in the head. Somebody shot him to death, and somebody stabbed Sherry Bradley to death. The question is, who is them?
Any suspects so far?
Yeah, actually.
Excellent.
When the officers started arriving, the initial suspect was out in the front yard area. He was agitated and crying.
He also had high-velocity blood spatter on his shirt, so we just loaded him up and took him downtown.
Good work, JD. Who is he?
Melvin Carroll. He owns the house, and the victim in the driveway, Anthony, is his little brother.
Violence between family members is not rare. You would think it would be. You would think that people are not going to kill the ones they love, but yeah, they will.
About 25% of crimes in this country are committed by family members.
Could Melvin have killed his brother and his brother's girlfriend in a twisted, jealous rage?
Look at this.
Yeah.
There was an extreme amount of blood, and then there was brain matter along with blood where his head had laid.
I noticed that there are small areas of blood coming out of that house, and the teardrop shape indicates forward motion. So someone's coming outside and they're bleeding while they're doing it.
It looks like he was shot at least once inside. Came out here, took the headshot and dropped.
So the killer followed you?
Appears that way. Let's head inside. Watch your step.
This is a very well-maintained private home. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. Freshly vacuumed, it is immaculate, which draws your attention to this object laying on the floor in the living room, the blood-covered knife.
Hey, Josh. It's a kitchen knife. Is there anything missing?
Yep. Part of the set.
It's a weapon of opportunity. Whoever did this didn't bring a knife with them to do this.
You should be marked that.
They obtained the knife there.
Strange place to put a murder weapon.
You discover 2 weapons in a crime scene, your first instinct is 2 different bad guys. Now it makes it doubly difficult to determine who's responsible.
This is a really, really tidy house. That's why the phone in the middle of the floor.
Yeah, doesn't seem a little off.
Let's follow the blood in the back.
The trail of blood winds its way through the home.
There is more blood, smears on the wall, and blood on the carpet, leading back into the master bedroom in this trailer.
Look at that.
Somebody kicked in that door.
Think Anthony was in here and Melvin was trying to get at him?
Well, right now, that'd be my guess.
Yeah, look.
There is a bullet hole in the door frame of this master bedroom. So whoever gets shot in there, which is no doubt Anthony, gets up. Now he is moving all the way through the trailer.
And Melvin finishes off Anthony out front.
Well, somebody does.
Crime scenes tell you what happened. It doesn't tell you who made it happen.
Kenda and Hendricks now have an idea how Anthony was killed, but his girlfriend Cherie's death remains a mystery.
When you inspect this scene, the next obvious thing to do is to look in the bathroom. There's quite a bit of blood, half-inch deep or so in the tub. That blade's going through heart, lungs, all sorts of things that do major bleeding.
Poor Sherry had been stabbed and stabbed and stabbed again.
So she was stabbed, what, 16, 17 times?
Yeah.
I'm a professional. I see human remains. I see evidence of violence. I see it all the time.
See how the shower curtains underneath her? I mean, she was standing, the attacker pushed her backwards.
She's not surprised. It's a frontal attack.
Then she was stabbed repeatedly while she was down on her back.
She's taking stabbing injuries to her fingers and her hands to try to stop this person from stabbing her.
Think Brother Melvin might have been in love with Sherry?
That's the kind of love she could have done without.
This is absolutely passion murder. Multiple wounds, rage attack, everything about it says personal.
With still so many unanswered questions, Kenda heads outside to speak with potential witnesses.
Down here. This is Victoria Carroll. She's the wife of the guy we took downtown, and she says she was inside when everything started.
Thank you.
I left and went to the neighbor's house as soon as I heard the screams.
Okay, Victoria, take a deep breath.
Victoria is 25 years of age. She's holding the daughter of Sherry Bradley. She is incredibly traumatized, but I need to know what happened here.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you some difficult questions.
Sometimes if you ask somebody an accusatory question, particularly against a loved one of theirs, they'll blurt out what they know. So I said to her,
Can you tell me why your husband, Melvin, would kill his own brother and then kill Sherry?
That's not what happened.
really? Well, my. So we arrive at this confused, horrific scene of dead people, all involving family members. Melvin is the obvious suspect, who is probably responsible for at least the death of Anthony. Could he also be responsible for Sherry?
You got it all wrong. That was not my husband, Melvin. He didn't kill Sherry Bradley. Anthony did.
Victoria explains that Anthony had a history of emotional problems.
He'd developed a pretty good drug habit, wound up making a suicide attempt. And at that point, his dad said, hey, do me a favor. You got to help me straighten him out. He's your brother. And so Melvin said, okay, and took this burden on.
Anthony got a job. He got an apartment. His new girlfriend, Sherry, moved in with him. But then over a relatively short period of time, Anthony began to spiral again. Victoria explains that Sherry Bradley has moved in with them and has been staying there because she broke up with Anthony, that they've been having serious problems.
She just wanted to stay for a couple of days before she get on a plane to Illinois. She was supposed to leave tomorrow.
But Victoria tells Kenda that around 6 o'clock last night, Anthony showed up at their door.
Victoria explains that Anthony was not invited over, but he came over.
man. I don't want any trouble here.
You don't want any trouble, man. That's why I say bye, Charity, baby.
We knew he shouldn't have been around. But since Sherry and the baby was leaving tomorrow, we decided to let him in.
All right, but keep it cool.
Promise.
Anthony comes in. They watch the game for a little while, and everything seems to be fine. Sherry gets up to go to the bathroom. All of a sudden, Anthony gets up, follows her into the bathroom. Victoria looked at that and thought that was odd.
Moments later, Victoria noticed that something else was amiss.
Hey, babe, have you seen the carving knife?
It's in the butcher's block, where it always is.
It most certainly is not.
Take the baby. Now, get out of here. Hurry up, hurry.
Melvin just told me to get the baby and run to the neighbor's house.
Victoria comes across as very believable. She's not trying to protect anybody. She's not trying to minimize anybody's behavior. Every story has a beginning, and violence in that bathroom is what initiates this whole process. And I take a deputy district attorney with me to talk to Melvin, because I truly believe Melvin is acting in his own defense or defense of his family. So I want that DA there, because he's in a position as the deputy district attorney to make the decision to not place Melvin in custody. Melvin is nervous, he is cooperative, he's frightened.
Melvin, this is the district attorney. He wants to hear your side of the story as well.
Tell us what happened here, and he does.
When I heard Sherry scream, I ran down the hall.
He goes to the bathroom door, and it's locked.
Anthony! Anthony! Go elsewhere! Anthony! Ah! What is going down? Anthony! I killed her, Melvin. I killed her. And now I'm gonna kill you.
Melvin turns and runs to the master bedroom because he has a gun in there he got from his grandfather. An old .32 caliber revolver, but it's loaded. And he keeps it in the bedroom to protect his family.
Open the door, Melvin.
I got a gun, Anthony.
Open the goddamn door, Melvin. Open the door, man.
Get away, Anthony. I got a gun. I don't want to do this, man.
He shoots him in the arm and the upper shoulder, and he knocks him down. He falls from the gunshot wounds.
Damn it, Anthony. I told you don't do this shit, man.
He's trying to call 911. He puts the knife down on the carpet. It's like a scene out of a horror movie. He turns around and looks at him. And his brother says again, I'm gonna kill you.
Kill you. Please, Anthony. Don't make me do this. I'm gonna kill you, Melvin. Please don't make me do this, Anthony. Come on, don't make me do this.
I shot him in the head. And he went down. And he stayed down. I went to the house and I called 911.
He still has the gun in his hand. He doesn't want the police to shoot him. So he sets the gun down.
And then there's that moment where everything must have dawned on him. Just the gravity of the situation. He's got a dead woman in his house. He's got a baby with no mama. He doesn't know where his wife is. He's killed his brother. He's going to have to tell his dad.
Less than a month later, a grand jury finds no basis for criminal charges, confirming Melvin Carroll acted in self-defense.
Anthony had a plan. He didn't come over there and think this up while he was there. Anthony had told friends that he was going to kill his girlfriend and kill himself. We discovered this in the later part of the investigation. My opinion is that Anthony is engaged in suicide by his brother.
The moral of this story is that sometimes there are problems that are just too big to be dealt with without some professional help.
Families who have no training in how to deal with someone who's as disturbed as Anthony was are simply not equipped to solve this problem. It's not because they don't want to, it's not because they wouldn't love to, they just don't know how. In the case of Sherry Bradley's family, they lose a daughter and can do nothing about it. The only positive thing that came out of this was that Melvin didn't go to jail, but Melvin still becomes a prisoner of his own mind, causing the death of his own brother by his own hand.
The headline hit London like a thunderclap. London 30-year cold case solved, quiet neighbor charged in chilling turn. For most people, it was just another shocking line in a city that lives on breaking news. For a small corner of East London, it was a wound ripped open, a ghost dragged back into the light, because behind that headline was a name the neighborhood had tried to stop whispering. Emily Ward, 19, vanished without a trace on a wet October night in 1995. Picture it. East London before the glass towers, before the artisan coffee shops and luxury lofts. Narrow streets, flickering sodium lights, pubs spilling noise onto slick pavements, the smell of fried food and diesel. On the corner of Alder Lane, a small cafe with a squeaking sign, the Railway Spoon. That's where Emily worked the late shift. That's where she was last seen, alive, laughing, stacking chairs, wiping down tables, promising she'd be home in 20 minutes, Mom. She never made that 20 minutes. Inside the cafe, the last customers filter out. CCTV, grainy and gray, catches fragments, a clock above the counter ticking toward 10:47 p.m. Emily tying her dark hair back, pulling on a long coat, a bright red scarf coiled at her throat like a flare in the monochrome footage. She waves to her manager, grabs her bag, pushes open the door. The bell chimes. The door shuts. The clock keeps ticking. Outside, it's raining. Thin London rain that never quite commits, just hangs in the air. Emily cuts across the street, head down, scarf bright against the dark. One camera sees her turn into the alley behind the cafe, a shortcut she'd taken 100 times. It's faster. It's familiar. It's home. Then she steps out of frame. And just like that, she is gone. No screams reported, no obvious struggle, no car screeching away, just a gap. 90 seconds of blind spot between one camera and the next. 90 seconds that will haunt detectives for 3 decades. Morning comes. The sky over London is a dull, flat gray. In a small, semi-detached house 3 bus stops away, the Ward family kitchen is quiet. Too quiet. Emily's bed is untouched. Her room still smells like hairspray and cheap perfume. Her art portfolio leans against the wall, open to a half-finished sketch of the very street she disappeared on. Her mother thinks she overslept. Her brother thinks she crashed at a friend's flat. By lunchtime, the silence feels wrong. By late afternoon, wrong turns to dread. At 6:12 p.m., Emily Ward is officially reported missing. A patrol car rolls up to Alder Lane. Officers walk through the cafe, nod to the manager, replay the CCTV. The footage is short, harsh, unforgiving. There she is. There she goes. They replay the clip in slow motion as if the pixels might confess something they missed. A shadow in the corner, a blurred shape at the edge of frame. Nothing clear enough to hold, nothing clear enough to charge. Outside, drizzle beads on police tape as they quickly block off the alley. A small crowd gathers, drawn in by the lights and the uniforms. Neighbors crane their necks. Staff from the pub across the road light cigarettes and stare. Someone says, "Is it a stabbing?" Someone else mutters, "No, it's that girl, the one from the cafe." Rumors bloom faster than facts. On the wet cobblestones of the alley behind the Railway Spoon, officers bend down. There, half-soaked, trampled slightly into the grime, lies a splash of color that shouldn't be there. A bright red scarf, twisted, muddy, abandoned. It's Emily's. And in that quiet, cold, narrow corridor of brick and shadow, London's next cold case is born. The morning after Emily Ward vanished, London woke to another gray sky and another headline most people would skim and forget. But on Alder Lane, the air felt different, thick, like the street itself was holding its breath. Blue and white tape fluttered across the mouth of the alley behind the Railway Spoon, turning an ordinary shortcut into a border between before and after. Uniformed officers moved in short bursts, radios crackling, boots slick with last night's rain. For the regulars stumbling into the cafe for their first coffee, it was like walking onto the set of a crime bulletin. Only this time the fear was real, and the missing girl was someone they knew by name. Inside the Ward house, 3 bus stops away, the day began with a simple horror. An alarm blaring in an empty bedroom. Emily's mother pushed open the door, already rehearsing the usual complaint. "You're going to be late, Em." And then the words died. The bed was made. The window was shut. Her coat was gone. Her shoes were gone. But the room had that still, stale quality of a space untouched all night. The alarm buzzed until she crossed the room and switched it off, fingers suddenly clumsy, heart suddenly cold. An hour later, there were police in the kitchen. 2 uniforms, a family liaison officer, and a detective with tired eyes introducing himself as Colin Mercer. Emily's mother sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she never lifted. Her father stood at the sink, staring out of the small window into the tiny garden, jaw clenched tight enough that a muscle in his cheek twitched in time with the ticking clock. Mercer opened his notebook. He'd stood in kitchens like this before, neat rooms full of photographs of the person who was now a case file. On the wall next to the fridge, in a cheap frame, Emily smiled at the camera from a beach somewhere, hair blowing across her face, eyes creased with laughter. 19. It was always the young ones that made the air feel heavier. "When did you last see your daughter?" he asked. "Yesterday," her mother said. "Before her shift. She left at 4. She said she'd be home a bit after 11. She always is. She always calls if she's going to be late." "Did she call last night?" "No." A small shake of the head. "No call, no text, nothing." "Has she ever stayed out without telling you?" Mercer pressed. "Stayed at a friend's, at her boyfriend's, just decided not to come home?" "She tells me," her mother repeated, each word a small act of defiance. "Even if it's late, even if we've argued, she never just disappears." Her father finally turned from the window. "Are you treating this as serious?" he asked, voice low but edged with iron. "Or is this going to be one of those, she's probably run off cases because she hasn't, she wouldn't?" "We're treating it as serious," Mercer said. "Girl, night shift, lonely alley, abandoned scarf, alarm bells everywhere. We're doing everything we can." Back on Alder Lane, the everything had already begun. The alley behind the cafe was a grid, each crack in the bricks and smear on the pavement photographed, numbered, recorded. The red scarf, coiled in a clear evidence bag, lay on a steel table inside a mobile forensic unit, its bright strip of color damp with rain and something else. Questions. Technicians leaned over it, tweezers and swabs in hand, searching for hairs, fibers, the microscopic traces of whoever had been close enough to take it from her throat. Inside the cafe, the staff huddled near the counter, whispering, eyes flicking to the door every time it opened. The manager, a man in his 50s with tired shoulders and a permanent tea stain on his wrist, replayed the previous night like a looped tape. Emily cashing up, Emily laughing about a song stuck in her head, Emily tying her hair back, saying, "See you tomorrow, yeah," and him answering without looking up, Yeah, off you trot," never imagining those might be the last words anyone heard from her. Mercer stood with him in the narrow office, watching the CCTV on a small flickering monitor, grainy black and white, the lens slightly smudged. There she was behind the counter, hands moving fast. There she was turning off the lights, leaving only the glow from the kitchen behind. There she was at the door, pulling on that bright red scarf like a final signature of color in a monotone world. The timestamp in the corner blinked 22:47. She stepped outside, the door swung shut. The camera caught the empty doorway for a few seconds more, then cut to static. "Any cameras outside?" Mercer asked. The manager shook his head. "Council said they'd put some up on the street last year. Cutbacks. Nothing happened." "What about the other businesses? Pub off license, bookies?" "We've asked," an officer said from the doorway. "Pub's got one, but it faces the bar, not the street. Off-license system's been broken for months. Bookies recorded over last night already." Of course they had. Tape costs money, memory costs money. The city notices too late the things it chooses not to record. So they worked with what little they had. A staff member had seen Emily turn toward the alley, the shortcut she always used. A neighbor at the far end of the lane thought they'd heard a car door around 11, but they weren't sure. It was raining. The telly was on. Memory is foggy, Mercer knew, even on a clear night. By lunchtime, the missing person alert was in the system, radio broadcasts, an appeal on local television. Her school photo, hurriedly scanned, showed a girl younger than 19, hair shorter, smile shy. It was enough for strangers to say, "Oh, her," when they saw the posters that officers began taping to poles and bus shelters. Enough to turn Emily Ward from a private heartbreak into a public story. Back at the station, Mercer sat across from Emily's boyfriend in a small interview room that smelled of bleach and old sweat. Daniel Price, 22, band t-shirt under an unbuttoned shirt, calloused fingers picking at the edge of the table. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice hoarse. "When did you last speak to Emily?" Mercer asked, the recorder on the table whirring softly. "Last night," Daniel said. "She texted me around 10, said she was knackered, that it had been a long shift, said she'd walk straight home. I told her I could meet her, but she said, 'No, I'm fine, I do it every night.'" He swallowed. "I should have gone." "You were at band practice?" "Yeah, studio by the Arches near Mile Road. I've got the booking sheet, the lads will back me up. We were there from 8 till midnight." Mercer nodded. "They'd check." "Had you and Emily argued recently?" Daniel flinched. "We had a row last week. Money, gigs, she wanted me to think about a proper job. I said she didn't get it. We made up. I swear we made up. She wouldn't just take off because of that. We're not saying she did. Mercer kept his voice level. We're trying to build a picture. Who she knew, who might have had a problem with her, who might have been watching. The word hung there. Watching. Daniel's fingers stilled on the tabletop. You think someone was following her? He whispered. I think a 19-year-old girl doesn't just vanish between one camera and the next, Mercer said. Somebody saw her. Somebody crossed her path. Outside that room, maps were already going up on the walls of the incident room. Red string from the cafe to the ward house, circles marking possible routes and blind spots, names on sticky notes, family, friends, ex-coworkers, neighbors, regular customers, each one a potential witness, each one, until ruled out, a potential threat. The first 24 hours bled into the second. Statements were taken, timelines written and rewritten. The alley was combed again under better light, officers on hands and knees, gloved fingers tracing the cracks between cobbles, searching for something that didn't belong. A dropped button, a cigarette butt, a smear of something darker than rainwater. They found smudged shoe prints layered on top of one another, hers, his, theirs, a crowd of ghosts stamped into wet concrete. They photographed them, cast them, logged them, knowing most would lead nowhere. The red scarf went to the lab. The report came back thin, frustrating, some fibers consistent with her coat and uniform, trace elements of city dirt, oil from a car exhaust, faint hints of a cheap men's cologne that could have belonged to any one of 1,000 men in London. No blood. No obvious signs it had been ripped away violently rather than dropped, a question mark disguised as evidence. An anonymous call crackled through the switchboard late on the second night, a rough voice, never giving a name, insisting that Emily had run off with some bloke from the pub, that she'd been seen laughing in a car heading toward the motorway. When pressed for details, the caller turned aggressive, then hung up. The number was traced to a payphone near a betting shop. No usable CCTV. Probably a crank. Probably someone who wanted their 5 minutes of relevance in someone else's nightmare. Still, for an hour, officers checked motorway service station cameras, just in case. By the third day, the press were fully circling. Reporters with microphones appeared outside the ward house, outside the cafe, outside the station. They asked the same questions in slightly different tones. Do you think she's still alive? Do you believe the police are doing enough? Are you angry? Emily's mother, caught once on the doorstep, shielded her face with her hand and said, I just want my daughter home, before the liaison officer gently guided her back inside. That 6-second clip played on loop on the evening news, slotted between weather and sport. In the incident room, Mercer stared at the board, at Emily's photograph, at the map with its web of red lines, at the small black and white print showing the alley from above, grainy and flat and utterly indifferent. Somewhere in that 90-second gap between the cafe camera and the blind corner, something had happened. Something fast, controlled, efficient. No screams, no struggle anyone remembered, no body on the ground, just a girl in a scarf, and then nothing. Cases like this didn't stay missing persons for long, he knew. Not with this many red flags, not with this much silence. The word everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say settled over the room like fog. Murder. Only without a body, without a scene, without a weapon. Murder was a story they could only tell in hushed, uncertain sentences. And stories like that had a way of sinking, slowly, under the weight of newer, louder tragedies, unless somehow some small, stubborn detail refused to let them drown. By the end of the first week, Emily Ward was no longer just a missing girl. She was a headline, a cautionary tale, a face the whole city thought it knew. Her poster stared back from newsstands and bus shelters, from the window of the laundrette and the pub door on Alder Lane. Missing. Have you seen Emily? The question grew heavier every day it went unanswered. Inside the incident room, the question had already shifted. Not where is Emily, but what was done to her, and who did it. The board on the wall had stopped being a neat display and turned into a battlefield. Photographs, names, arrows, timelines scribbled, crossed out, rewritten, the alley marked in red, the cafe in blue, the ward house in green. 90 seconds of blind space circled so hard the paper had begun to tear. Detective Sergeant Colin Mercer stood with a mug of coffee cooling in his hand, eyes locked on that ring of ink. Someone knew that gap, he said quietly. Someone used it. A younger constable nearby glanced up. Sir? Most people don't think like that, Mercer went on, more to himself than anyone else. They walk the way they walk. They cut corners because it's quicker, not because the cameras don't see them. He tapped the map. But whoever took her, they moved like they were rehearsing. In and out. No noise, no witnesses. That's not luck. That's practice. Practice. The word slid through the room like a draft. They had a list of everyone who worked late nearby. Cafe staff, pub staff, the guy at the off license, the bookie's cleaner, delivery drivers who used the lane as a shortcut, Dozens of statements, dozens of alibis. It was like trying to separate one specific raindrop from a week of London weather. One name, though, kept circling back. A woman from the flats overlooking the alley mentioned him first. "That bloke with the dog," she said, "always hanging around late, just standing, smoking, watching." She didn't know his name, just that he wore the same patched jacket, that his dog was a mottled thing with one ear folded down, that he always seemed to be there when the cafe emptied out. Another resident mentioned a similar figure. "Keeps odd hours, lives alone, top floor, end of Cloverdale Street," they said. "Doesn't say much, gives you a look like he's counting you." A third witness, a delivery driver, remembered nearly bumping into a man at the mouth of the alley the week before Emily vanished. "He didn't move," the driver said, annoyed even in hindsight. "Just stared at me till I went around. Who does that?" The description matched. Late 30s, wiry, dark hair going thin, cheap parka jacket, smoker's cough. The address wasn't hard to find. His name was Malcolm Reed. The door to his flat opened after the third knock, chain still on. A slice of face peered out, pale, shadowed. The dog barked once behind him and then went quiet. "Mr. Reed?" Mercer held up his warrant card. "We'd like to talk to you about a missing person, a girl who worked at the cafe on Alder Lane." Reed's eyes flickered. "I've already told them," he said, voice flat. "The uniforms. I didn't see anything. I keep myself to myself." "We'd still like you to come down to the station," Mercer replied. "You're not under arrest, but we need to get a full statement." Reed hesitated. The chain rattled. For a moment it looked like he might slam the door. Instead, he unhooked the chain and stepped back. The hallway behind him smelled of stale smoke and something metallic. The dog watched the officers with sharp, unblinking eyes. At the station, under the cold gaze of the interview room camera, Reed folded his arms and stared at the table. He answered questions with short, clipped words. Yes, he walked the dog late. The dog liked the cool air. No, he didn't know the girl from the cafe. He'd seen her, like everyone else, but never spoken to her. No, he didn't use the alley that often. No, he didn't own a car, couldn't afford one. Yes, he'd noticed police there that night, but from his window, not the street. "Where were you at 11 p.m. on the 13th, Mercer asked. "In," Reed said. "Watching telly, alone." He gave a tight, humorless smile. "So I suppose that's no good, is it? Did anyone see you, hear you, call you? Did you leave the flat at any point?" No. His record showed nothing serious. A drunk and disorderly in his 20s, an argument with a landlord that got heated, no violence against women, no previous charges that screamed danger. Just the usual background noise of a man who hadn't done much with his life and resented it. Still, something in his demeanor unsettled the team. The way he seemed almost rehearsed in his innocence, the way he never asked, not once, what happened to her. They searched his flat. The dog was taken to a neighbor. Officers moved carefully through rooms stained with nicotine and neglect. They bagged his jacket, his boots, cigarette packets, pillowcases. If Emily had ever been in that flat, they wanted proof. In a drawer by his bed, they found a stack of old newspapers folded open on stories about crime. Missing women, murdered students, headlines underlined in pen, a scrapbook without glue, just pages slipped together, edges soft from repeated handling. "He's obsessed," a young detective muttered, flipping through. "Look at this. It's all women, all of them." "Half the front pages in this country are women," Mercer said. "Fear sells. Doesn't make him a killer. It just makes him like everyone else who buys these." But his eyes lingered on one clipping, a small article, months old, about an attempted abduction 2 boroughs away. The victim had fought back. The attacker fled. No arrest, no sketch, just a vague description. Male, medium height, late 30s. Reed's age, Reed's build, Reed's nothing proof, nothing clearing. Forensics worked fast on what they'd pulled from the flat. Fibers from the jacket and the carpets, hair from the shower drain, skin cells from the inside of a cigarette butt, all of it compared to the traces on Emily's red scarf. Days passed. The press scented blood. "Odd loner quizzed over cafe girl," a tabloid screamed, printing a long lens photograph of Reed's front door. They didn't have his face, so they used his silhouette at the window. It was enough to make neighbors cross the street rather than walk past the building. Enough to make one woman tell a reporter, "I always thought there was something off about him." Fear loves hindsight. In the lab, machines hummed, samples spun, results printed. When the report landed on Mercer's desk, it didn't read like a revelation, it read like a shrug. The fibers from Reed's jacket did not match those on the scarf. The dog hairs in his flat did not appear on any of Emily's clothes. His DNA did not show up in any of the profiles they could scrape from the damp, compromised fabric. They had a presence on the scarf, unknown male, partial sample, but it wasn't Reed. "You sure?" Mercer asked the forensic tech, knowing the answer and hating it anyway. "As sure as we can be," she said. "Could he have brushed past her once, on the street, left nothing and still be your man? Sure, but there's nothing tying him in. Not the scarf, not the alley, not the timeline, nothing I can stand up in court with." Nothing you can stand up with. Everything they had was feeling, vibes, a stack of crime clippings and night walks, and a man who looked wrong in the wrong place at the wrong time. Juries don't convict on vibes. Reed was released without charge. Reporters waited for him outside the station. He pushed through them, head down, the dog pulling at the lead. Questions bombarded him. Did you take Emily? Are you the East End predator? Why are you interested in missing women, Malcolm? He said nothing. The next day, his door was painted with a word in red spray, monster. A week later, he was gone, flat empty, dog vanished, no forwarding address. One suspect down, 1,000 shadows left. The case shifted gears, if not the loner upstairs, then who? The circle widened. Men from the pub who'd flirted with Emily, drunk regulars who slurred comments when she wiped their tables, the taxi drivers who passed through Alder Lane after closing. Anyone who'd been near her wrote home in the weeks before she vanished. One name surfaced from witness statements at the cafe, a delivery driver, mid-30s then, short-tempered, always watching, tried to get Emily to go for a drink after her shift, even after she'd said she had a boyfriend. He left one evening in a rage after she laughed him off in front of the other staff. They tracked him down. He'd moved to Birmingham, married, 2 kids, clean record. He admitted he'd had a bit of a crush on Emily, admitted he'd been embarrassed when she brushed him off, denied over and over having seen her on the night she disappeared. His phone records from that night showed calls miles away, to a different depot, a different route. His employer backed his alibi, another maybe collapsed. Under the harsh strip lights of the incident room, the board grew crowded and then strangely empty. Names were crossed out one by one. Lines of inquiry were marked exhausted. Every path the team had mapped now circled back on itself, tracking the same 90 seconds of missing time over and over until the paper wore thin. What they had was this. Emily left the cafe at 22:47. She turned into the alley. A witness in a flat heard a car door around 2300 but saw nothing clear. A scarf was found on the ground. No body, no blood, no sounds of a struggle, no clear fingerprints on the scarf, just overlapping ghosts. No full DNA profile, just fragments. 23 minutes, a narrow window in which a life had been rerouted permanently into the unknown. One night, long after the others had gone home, Mercer stood alone in the empty room, the humming of the vending machine the only sound. He pinned a fresh copy of Emily's photograph at the center of the board. The blue tack snapped as he pressed it in. He stepped back. "You didn't just vanish," he said softly, to the picture, to the air, to himself. "Someone put their hands on you. Someone opened a door. Someone drove away." He thought about the anonymous phone call. "She's in the water." He thought about the canal dragging that had found nothing. He thought about the railway tracks behind Alder Lane, the rough sleepers who sometimes camped near the embankment, the endless places a body could be hidden in a city that never stops building over its own bones. The file number on her case folder was a neat, impersonal thing, a line of letters and digits that could have belonged to a parking ticket. He closed his eyes and saw it stamped on her forehead, replacing her name. He promised himself he wouldn't let that happen. The city moved on. Other crimes, other sirens, other names written on boards and then wiped away. The ward investigation shrank, inevitably, as fresh emergencies demanded fresh manpower. Officers were reassigned, the room was cleared, the maps came down, the photos went into a box, the box went into storage. Officially, the case remained open, unsolved. A missing person inquiry shading into suspected homicide with no body, no charge, no closure. Unofficially, it became exactly what the tabloids would one day call it. A cold case. On Alder Lane, autumn returned, and with it the same thin rain that had been falling the night Emily disappeared. New staff worked shifts at a cafe that no longer felt quite like the Railway Spoon of 1995. The sign had been repainted. The prices changed, the regulars thinned out or moved away. But if you stood in the alley late at night, when the noise died down and the city hummed at a lower pitch, you could still feel it, that quiet, sharp absence where something terrible had once happened quickly, cleanly, and without witnesses. For the Ward family, days became years. For Mercer, other cases layered themselves over this one, but never fully obscured it. And somewhere, in a locked evidence room, sealed in plastic that clouded a little more each season, a red scarf slept under dust, holding on to particles of truth too small for 1995 to see. Later, much later, when new science and old guilt dragged that scarf back into the light, reporters would call it the key that cracked London's 30-year mystery. They would say the case was solved, that justice had finally come, that the city could move on. But in that first year, in that first hollow stretch of unanswered days, all anyone really had was a girl who walked into an alley and never came out, and a city that slowly learned how to live with the echo of her footsteps. The first anniversary came like a date circled in red on a calendar nobody wanted to own. 13th of October. 1 year to the day since Emily Ward walked out of the Railway Spoon and vanished into a gap the city still couldn't explain. The posters were gone now, peeled away by rain and indifference, but the Ward family hadn't moved on. They'd just learned to live inside the waiting. That evening, a thin line of people gathered at the mouth of the alley on Alder Lane, candles cupped in their hands. Neighbors, a few of Emily's old school friends, a couple of former co-workers from the cafe who'd moved on to other jobs, other shifts, other lives that still dragged this night behind them like a chain. Cameras hovered at the edges, breath misting in the autumn air, lenses trained on the small cluster of light. Emily's mother stood at the front, a framed photograph pressed against her chest. Not the school portrait the media always used, but a candid shot. Emily on the sofa, socks mismatched, laughing at something just out of frame. A normal girl, frozen in a normal moment, now held up as evidence that she had once been here, once filled space and air and conversation. A local priest said a short prayer. Someone read a poem they'd found online. The words floated up into the damp air and disappeared between the bricks like smoke. When it was over, people left their candles on a low ledge near the alley entrance. Some burned straight and steady, others flickered, guttered out, leaving dark pools of wax on the stone that would be scrubbed away by morning. Detective Sergeant Colin Mercer watched from the back, hands buried in his coat pockets. He wasn't officially there in any capacity. No speech, no uniform, just one more figure in the dark, carrying the guilt of a file with his name on it that hadn't ended the way it was supposed to. When Emily's mother caught sight of him, she stepped toward him, eyes bright in the candlelight. "Have you heard anything?" she asked. The question was simple, sharpened by 12 months of repetition. "Anything at all?" "No new leads," he said quietly. The stock phrase tasted worse every time he used it. "But the case is still open. We haven't forgotten her." She nodded, but there was a tightness around her mouth, the early stages of a look he'd seen on other faces in other kitchens. A look that said, "I hear you, but I don't believe you. Not fully, not anymore." After the vigil, Alder Lane went back to pretending. The cafe closed, the pub spilled music and laughter, the alley sank into shadow. The candles burned down to stubs and died, one by one, until only the orange sodium streetlight remained, buzzing faintly above the place where the red scarf had once lain. Months blurred into each other. The city ate its own stories, a stabbing in the West End, a bank robbery gone wrong, a string of burglaries in the suburbs. Each new case demanded a new room, a new board, a new burst of focus. The ward file, now thick with witness statements and thin on answers, sat in a drawer that could be pulled open at any time but rarely was. Mercer did open it, though, late at night, on those days when the job felt like sand slipping through his fingers. He'd take the box out, lay the contents on his desk in a quiet corner, and walk himself back through October '95 as if he could rewrite it by sheer force of will. The cafe photos, the alley shots, the printout of her last CCTV frame, eyes down, scarf bright. The lab report on the scarf itself, full of phrases like inconclusive and limited sample, and no definite match identified. Every time he ended up at the same point, 90 seconds of dark. 90 seconds where a stranger with a plan could move quickly and cleanly and disappear into a city that never stopped swallowing people whole. At home, he slept badly. Sometimes he dreamed of the alley. Only in the dream it stretched on forever. A tunnel that didn't end, lined with doors that never opened, his footsteps echoing as he ran and never caught up to the faint sound of a girl's laugh just ahead of him. On Alder Lane, memory shifted in subtle ways. New people moved into the flats overlooking the alley, bringing fresh furniture, different curtains, unfamiliar habits. They heard the story in fragments, the way cities pass down their own legends. "That alley," someone would say at a party, gesturing with a glass. "Girl vanished down there years ago, never found her. They say you can still hear." And then the punchline would change depending on who was telling it. Footsteps, whispers, a scarf flapping with no wind. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the shiver, the shared moment of unease. The old regulars noticed the new stories and said nothing. They remembered the real version with its far less cinematic details. Police tape catching the rain, a mother with red-rimmed eyes standing in the gutter because she couldn't bear to stand anywhere else, the sound of evidence bags crinkling instead of ghosts. As years ticked by, small things from that time began to disappear. The payphone near the betting shop where the anonymous "she's in the water" call had been made was removed, replaced by a sleek glass information point that dispensed Wi-Fi and tourist maps instead of crackling threats. The off-license changed hands, then changed again, eventually becoming a bright little deli selling expensive olives and artisan bread. The railway arches, once damp rehearsal spaces and cheap lockups, were converted into studios and bars with craft beer menus written on chalkboards. Only the alley held its shape. Two walls facing each other, one thin strip of sky, shadows that arrived early and left late, bricks that, if you looked closely, still bore the faint marks of old crime scene tape adhesive. Every October, Emily's mother kept her own ritual. If the cameras came, she spoke less. If they didn't, she lit her candle anyway, just her and a photograph and the sound of the city going about its business. Her husband stopped coming after the 3rd year. It was too much, he said, or not enough. Her son drifted further away, first to a different postcode, then to a different city. Sometimes he called on the anniversary, sometimes he couldn't bring himself to. Distance is its own kind of survival. From time to time, a tip would surface. A man in a pub in Kent claimed to have seen a woman who looked exactly like Emily. A woman in Manchester swore she'd overheard 2 men talking about dumping a girl in an alley in East London back in the 90s. Each call triggered a small, frantic burst of activity, files pulled, travel authorized, statements taken. Every one of those flares burned bright, then fizzled out, leaving the Ward case darker for the brief hope it had entertained. One winter, about 7 years after the disappearance, a body was pulled from a canal in another part of the city. Young woman, similar build, dark hair, no ID. For a tense 48 hours, everyone was sure this was it, that Emily had finally been found, that the limbo would end, even if the ending was the one no one wanted to say out loud. The dental records didn't match. Different girl, different story. Another family stepped into the nightmare the Wards had been living in for years. The Ward file went back in the drawer, still lacking the one piece of paper that changes everything, the autopsy report. As the calendar rolled past a decade, the case shifted from recent to historic in the quiet, bureaucratic language of the job. A new wave of detectives joined the Met, younger faces who'd been in primary school when Emily vanished. To them, the case was a story the older officers told in the pub. We had this one back in the day, a cautionary tale about how sometimes you did everything right and still failed. Every so often, a new DCI on a mission would order a cold case review. Boxes would be pulled, evidence relisted, statements scanned into new databases with new search functions. A few names would be run again, just in case someone who'd been clean in '95 had been arrested for something else since. Cross-references, cross-checks, crossed fingers. Nothing. The scarf stayed where it was, sealed and sleeping. The technicians in the evidence locker knew its label by sight. Ward Emily, Exhibit 4, red wool scarf, damp on collection, now dry. DNA technology had improved, but resources were stretched, and there were dozens, hundreds of cases clamoring for a second look. Rapes with unknown suspects, murders with preserved blood, scenes where the potential yield from a retest was higher, cleaner, more likely to give the kind of full profile that made a prosecutor's eyes light up. A red scarf from a damp alley in '95 wasn't at the front of the queue. Not yet. Mercer watched the science change from a distance. He sat through training sessions on new developments, watched presentations about how samples smaller than a pinhead could now generate results that would have been impossible 10 years earlier. Each time, his mind went back to that bag, that fabric, those faint hints of cologne and city grime. He asked, quietly, how much it cost to rerun old exhibits. The answer was always the same: too much for now. Prioritize. Triage. Choose. He kept a photocopy of Emily's photograph in a folder in his desk. Not the official one, but a different shot a constable had once captured at the Ward house, a frame from a home video they'd borrowed and returned. Emily blowing out candles on a birthday cake, cheeks puffed, eyes squeezed shut, seconds before wish and flame met. The photocopy had blurred the edges, reducing her to light and shadow. It made her look slightly unreal, like a face glimpsed in a dream. Time moved on in big, showy ways. New skyscrapers, new prime ministers, new crises. The Ward case moved on in tiny, almost invisible ones. A file moved from one shelf to another during a reorganization. A piece of evidence logged into a new digital system under a slightly different code. A liaison officer retired, taking with him the muscle memory of the route to the Ward house front door. Yet even in its sleep, the case refused to die completely. Every few years, a journalist digging for an anniversary feature would pull at it. Unsolved London, the girl who never came home. The articles looked the same. A rehash of the timeline, a grainy black and white of the alley, a new photograph of Emily's mother looking older, holding the same picture of her daughter, saying the same line. If anyone knows anything, please just tell us. We can't keep living in this not knowing. On Alder Lane, gentrification finished what time had started. The old pub closed, replaced by a gastropub serving small plates and cocktails in jam jars. The cafe rebranded, new logo, new color scheme, a minimal sign that matched the rest of the street. The manager from '95 took early retirement, moved to the coast. Most of the old staff scattered. The new baristas and servers knew the story only in outline, something their boss told them during induction. Don't joke about the alley. Don't encourage customers to go ghost hunting. Show some respect. Even so, late at night, when the last tables were wiped and the last customers gone, some of them couldn't help glancing at the back door, at the thin line of darkness that marked the alley. It was just bricks and tarmac, just a shortcut. Just nothing. But nothing can be the heaviest thing in the world when it's wrapped around a missing girl's name. Somewhere on a different side of the city, in a small house with curtains always half drawn, Emily's mother sat at a kitchen table that felt too big, stirring a cup of tea she rarely drank and watching the clock tick toward 11 every night. You don't choose the hour your life stops. It chooses you and brands you with it. For her, 2247 wasn't a timestamp on a CCTV clip. It was the moment the world divided, before, after. For Mercer, the brand was less visible but no less permanent. Officers retire all the time. They put their suit jackets in the back of the wardrobe and learn to live without the radio's crackle, the adrenaline of a call-out. He tried. Golf, gardening, the things you're supposed to do when the badge comes off. But he carried the ward case like a stone in his pocket, always there, fingers brushing it when his mind wandered. One afternoon, years after he'd left the job, he walked down Alder Lane again. He told himself it was just a shortcut on the way to somewhere else, but as his feet carried him past the cafe's new, shiny sign and toward the mouth of the alley, he knew that was a lie. The alley smelled different now, less of rubbish and fried food, more of wet concrete and whatever detergent the council used. But under that, if he stood still long enough, there was something familiar, the ghost of a night that refused to fade. He stopped where the scarf had been found, though only he knew that exact patch of ground. Traffic hummed in the distance. A train clattered over the nearby tracks. Somewhere someone laughed. Life, moving on as if the city's past wasn't stacked under it like layers of sediment. "Where did you go?" he murmured into the empty space. Only the wind answered, sliding down the narrow corridor of brick. He turned away eventually, because that's what the living do. They turn away, even when part of them stays behind, stuck in a moment they can't unsee, at the beginning of a story they still don't know the end of. And in a chilled room miles away, behind a coded door and rows of identical shelves, a box labeled with Emily's name sat waiting. Inside, a red scarf lay coiled, fibers untouched by hands for years, carrying on its surface a smear of skin cells and sweat and city dust. Too small to speak in 1995, too faint to convict in the years that followed. Not yet the miracle headline, not yet the key. Just a silent witness, just a relic, just one stubborn piece of cloth holding tight to a truth that had managed for almost 3 decades to stay just out of reach. It starts, as these things often do, with a spreadsheet. Years after the candles on Alder Lane have burned down to nothing, years after the last anniversary article has slipped off the front page, somewhere in a concrete block of a police building in South London, a young detective sits under strip lights, scrolling through a list of the dead and the missing. Her name is Leah Grant, new to the cold case unit. Sharp, fast, restless, the kind of officer who still believes that files don't just gather dust, they wait. The document on her screen is brutal in its simplicity. Case number, name, date, status, a whole city's unfinished business boiled down to lines and cells. She scans past robberies, stabbings, unidentified bodies found on wasteland. Then her eyes snag on a name that means nothing to her at first. Ward, Emily, 13/10/1995. Missing, suspected homicide, location Alder Lane, East London. She clicks. The file opens like a time capsule. Old scanned reports, typewritten pages that predate her entire career. Grainy photos, a map of Alder Lane with red pen bleeding through the years. At the center, a girl in black and white, hair a little too big, smile a little shy. Underneath her photo, a single word typed in capital letters. Unresolved. The guidelines for the cold case unit are clear. Prioritize cases with physical evidence, cases where new forensic techniques might break old deadlocks. Leah flips through the exhibits list. Exhibit 1, CCTV tape. Exhibit 2, clothing from ward residents. Exhibit 3, soil and debris from alley. Exhibit 4, red wool scarf, recovered at scene, believed to belong to victim. Red wool scarf. She scrolls further, eyes narrowing at the old lab report. Limited testing in 1995. Degraded sample, partial unconfirmed traces from more than one contributor, no full DNA profile obtained, no suspect matched. The conclusion reads like a funeral note for opportunity. But that was then. Leah leans back in her chair. The room around her hums with quiet noise, printers, low voices, the clatter of keys. On the whiteboard, someone's written a slogan in blue marker. Old cases, new science, no excuses. She thinks about that scarf sealed and sleeping in the dark, about how many nights she's walked home past alley mouths and cut-throughs that look exactly like Alder Lane, about a 19-year-old girl stepping into a gap 90 seconds wide and never coming out. She prints the summary and takes it down the corridor. The evidence room is colder than the rest of the building. Rows of metal shelving, boxes stacked and labeled, decades of hurt organized into manageable rows. The custodian, a man with a beard like steel wool and an encyclopedic memory for case numbers, checks her request form. Ward, he says, running a finger along the printed line. Yeah, that one's been in and out a few times. Never for forensics, though. Press stuff, documentaries, the anniversary circus. He heaves himself up. Come on, then. Let's wake her up. They walk between shelves marked by year. 80s, 90s, early 2000s. He stops at a section labeled 1995, scans the numbers, and pulls out a medium-sized box. Masking tape on the lid, handwriting faded but legible. Ward, Emily, case refchu. A few digits, nothing to hint at the weight inside. He sets it on a metal table and flips the catches. Inside, every piece of that long-ago October sits exactly where a younger version of him once put it. Bagged clothing from the Ward house, a stack of photos, a VHS tape that hasn't been played in years. And nestled in the center like a heart, a clear plastic bag with a coil of dark fabric inside. The red scarf looks duller now, the color muted by time and by the cloudy sheen of the plastic. A label on the bag reads, Exhibit 4, recovered 14/10/1995, technician initials, date. A tiny sticker added later, do not open, DNA preservation. Leah stares at it, at the faint twist of wool, at the frozen shape of something once knotted around a living throat. Still gives me the creeps, that one, the custodian mutters. You going to run it? That's the idea, she says. About time, he snorts, then nods at the box. Sign here, and don't lose her. The paper might forgive you, the mother won't. The request to retest isn't simple. Everything costs money. Everything has to be justified in forms and meetings and careful language. Retesting a 30-year-old scarf means taking lab time away from something else. Fresh murders, fresh assaults, fresh pain. Leah takes the file to her DI, a woman whose desk is buried in hard drives and case notes. Look at the pattern, Leah says, tapping the summary. 19-year-old, last seen alive on camera. Clothing recovered with unknown male trace. The scarf was the only thing forensically interesting at the scene, and we barely scratched it. We can do better now. The DI looks over her glasses. You say that about every file you open. Because it's true, Leah shoots back. We're sitting on crime scenes we haven't finished reading. If we can get a viable profile from the scarf, we can run it through NDNAD, EU databases, even familial matching. He could be in there now. For something completely different, for a bar fight, for a drink drive, for anything. We wait, we lose more. The DI picks up the photograph of Emily, holds it for a long moment, puts it down again. You'll have to make the case to forensics, she says, and to budget, and to the superintendent. But, she taps the edge of the photo, she's the kind of file Politico likes to see on press releases. Met uses new science to tackle old failures. They love that. Might help your pitch. Leah doesn't wince at the word failures, but she feels it. I'll write it up. It takes 3 weeks of emails, meetings, and one tense presentation in a room full of senior officers to get what she needs. In the end, it comes down to optics as much as justice. 30-year cold case, young female victim, active, grieving mother still in the city, media interest with the right spin, and the glowing promise of DNA technology as the hero of the story. Approval comes through in a short clipped email, authorized, reanalysis of Exhibit 4 Ward case, priority status, medium-high. The scarf leaves its box for the first time in years. In a sterile lab, under bright, unforgiving light, technicians write a new date on a new form and carefully, precisely, cut into the bag at the corner. Gloved hands slide the wool free. It's strangely intimate after all this time, a gesture that feels almost like undressing something sacred. Under microscopes, the fibers are a tangle of old life. Dust, microscopic grit, tiny threads from the coat she wore that night, fragments of the world she walked through. Technicians take small punch samples from the areas most likely to have been in contact with hands, with skin, with struggle. The inside of one end, the area near the knot. The patch where the original report noted a faint smear of something indistinct. The samples are prepped, labeled again, fed into machines that didn't exist when Emily disappeared. DNA extraction, quantification, amplification, words the original investigating team had to use cautiously, knowing their tools lacked teeth. Now the hum of the sequencer is a low, constant promise. In the cold case office, Leah waits. She reads and rereads witness statements written in a different century's ink. The neighbor who heard a car door, the anonymous "she's in the water" caller, the strange man with the dog who turned out officially to be nothing, the delivery driver who was too angry, then too alibied, the boyfriend who never stopped blaming himself for not insisting on walking her home. She pins their faces and names to a modern board, recreating the old incident room in digital color. In the center, Emily's photograph, printed fresh from a scan. Above it, in thick marker, 3 words that feel like both a question and a curse. Who took her? The call from forensics comes on a Wednesday afternoon while Leah is halfway through a sandwich she doesn't want. The number flashes on her phone. Her pulse jumps. Grant. It's Patel at the lab, the voice on the other end says, calm, precise. We've got results on your scarf. Her chair scrapes, the board creaks as she turns toward it. Tell me. So, Patel's voice shifts slightly, the way people's do when they know they're about to change someone's day. We managed to get a better extraction from the samples near the knot. We have multiple contributors, as expected. Victim is present, consistent with reference sample from her hairbrush. We also have a secondary male profile, partial, degraded, but significantly more complete than what they had in 95. Leah's pen is already moving. How strong? Not perfect, but enough for a database search. We've cleaned the artifacts, run the controls twice. This isn't contamination from the lab. Somebody else had hold of that scarf. Could it be transfer from a family member, boyfriend, someone legitimate? We've compared to the boyfriend's old sample, the father, the brother. None fit. This is unknown male, not a relative. Early indications suggest he's not closely related to any of them either. Different haplotype. Her brain races. So we can run it? We already have, Patel says. You put medium-high priority on the file. We took that seriously. It's been processing through the national index all morning. And a tiny pause, less than a second. Enough. And we have a candidate, Patel says. I'm sending the preliminary match report now. It's not a full profile, so we're working with probability, but it's strong enough to put a name on your board with a line straight to that scarf. The email lands in Leah's inbox with a soft ping that feels, in that moment, louder than any siren. She opens it. At the top of the report is a familiar string of numbers and letters, the reference code for the Ward case. Beneath it, rows of alleles. Peaks on a graph, the language of genetics, spelling out what skin cells tried to tell policemen 30 years ago and couldn't. At the bottom, in bold, the interpretation. Partial DNA profile obtained from Exhibit 4, scarf, shows statistically significant match to subject Avery Thomas James. Doe, 0904-1967. Match probability 1 in several million for unrelated individual in UK population. Further confirmatory testing recommended. A figure crystallizes out of nowhere. A name that until this second has had nothing to do with Alder Lane, with the railway spoon, with a 19-year-old who never came home. Thomas James Avery. Leah stares at it. The world around her seems to narrow, sharpening into a tight frame, as if she's suddenly stepped into one of the televised reconstructions she grew up watching. This is the moment, she thinks. This is the beat where the voiceover says, after 3 decades of silence, a breakthrough, a single name rising out of the data, a quiet man with a past no one thought to question. She prints the report, fingers trembling very slightly, takes it and the file and pins the new sheet to the board next to Emily's photograph. Below the bold letters of who took her, she writes in black marker. Thomas Avery? A question for now, but not an empty one. Avery's profile in the system is there for a reason. A conviction, mid-2000s, for actual bodily harm after a bar fight. Routine swab taken, data stored, forgotten. A small blip in a life that otherwise looks unremarkable on paper. Until you draw a line from his DNA to a red wool scarf in a dark alley in 1995. Leah feels the hairs on her arms rise. Somewhere across the city, a man in his late 50s finishes his day's work on a building site, washes the dust from his hands, and locks his van. He has no idea that in a fluorescent room, his name has just been written under the face of a girl whose ghost he thought he'd outrun. The machine that took 30 years to start is finally moving again. The next steps are clear and deadly serious. Confirmatory testing. Check for any other contact between Avery and Emily. Plunge back into old call logs, old reports, old witness descriptions, and see what fits differently now that there's a name to press against them. Surveillance orders, risk assessments, a briefing to a chain of command that will want both caution and headlines. Leah stands in front of the board, heart hammering, and feels it in the air. That electric shift when a story stops being a sad, static paragraph in a dusty file and starts being a live investigation again. The kind of shift that makes reporters sharpen their pencils and families sit up straighter in their chairs. For nearly 30 years, the city has lived with a gap on Alder Lane, a blank between one camera frame and the next. Now, for the first time, it has something to pour into that gap. A name, a face, a man who maybe thought the dark had kept his secret. She takes a breath, steadying herself, and reaches for the phone. Because cold case or not, 30 years or not, spreadsheet or not, this is what it all comes down to. A voice on one end of the line, a knock on a door, and the moment a quiet neighbor opens it to find that the past has finally caught up. In the evidence locker, the red scarf lies back in its bag, fibers a little more frayed, secrets a little less airtight. The label still reads Exhibit 4. The box still says Ward Emily. But somewhere in the long chain of numbers and names and dates that define its official life, a new entry is being typed. Scarf, DNA linked to suspect identified. Case status, reactivated. The name hangs on the board like a loaded question. Thomas James Avery. A ghost dragged out of a database by lines of code and 30-year-old skin cells clinging to wool. Around it, the room starts to change. Old maps are reprinted. Old photos are pinned up beside new ones. A dead investigation jolts like a heart shocked back into rhythm. The briefing happens fast. It has to. News like this moves. If they don't control it, someone else will. Leah stands at the front of the room, the ward file thick under her hand, the DNA report clipped on top. Faces watch her, some young, some old enough to remember when these photos were fresh. Among them, in the second row, sits a man with gray at his temples and the posture of someone who never really stopped being a detective, even after retirement papers were signed. Colin Mercer. He doesn't speak yet. He just studies the board, eyes moving from Emily's face to the alley photo to the new name. He looks like someone seeing an old accident from a different angle for the first time. This morning, Leah says, voice steady, forensics confirmed a partial DNA match between a male profile recovered from Exhibit 4 in the Ward case, the red wool scarf found in the alley, and a profile on the national database belonging to one Thomas James Avery, date of birth 9th of April, 1967. She lets that land, the numbers, the dates, the fact that this isn't a theory, not yet a conviction, but more than the vague shadows they've had for almost 3 decades. The match probability is in the several million to 1 range for an unrelated individual, she continues. It's not a full profile, but it's strong enough to justify a reactive investigation, strong enough to put him in our sights. She taps the board where she's pinned a printout of Avery's file picture. Mid-40s at the time it was taken, hair cropped short for a custody shot, faint bruise on one cheek from the bar fight that first put his DNA into the system. A bad night, a thrown punch, a swab in a sterile room. A small, stupid act of violence that quietly planted a seed that would bloom 30 years later. What do we know about him? One DI asks. Leah flicks to the next slide. Current age, 58. Occupation, self-employed building contractor, small firm. Lives in a semi-detached house in a suburb on the city's eastern edge. No spouse, no children on record. 1 conviction for ABH in 2006. Before that, cautions for drunk and disorderly, minor public order stuff. No flagged sexual offenses. No previous appearance in the Ward investigation. She glances at Mercer. At least, not by name. Mercer shakes his head once. Never crossed our radar, he says. If he lived nearby, he blended, or he kept his head down at exactly the right moments. And then there's this. Leah clicks to an old employment record scanned from paper yellowed at the edges. In 1995, Avery was working as a laborer for a construction company based less than a mile from Alder Lane. Pay records show he was on a site a 10-minute walk from the railway spoon for several months on either side of October that year. He rented a room above a shuttered shop on Tallow Street. She zooms the map out. The red dots, cafe, alley, route home, light up like constellations. Avery's flat falls right into the pattern. Every line of Emily's nightly walk intersects with the streets he used as his route to work. She would have been part of his scenery, a fixture, the girl from the cafe, the one with the red scarf. Could he have just brushed past her one night, an officer asks, got his DNA on the scarf that way? Once? Leah says. Maybe, if they'd bumped into each other, if he'd grabbed her to stop her falling, if he'd put his hands on that scarf in any way, maybe some trace would transfer. But this isn't casual contact. This is concentrated near the knot, the part that sat against her throat. If he's on there, he was close. Closer than is easy to explain. Mercer speaks up, voice rough but clear. Our scene was dirty, he says. Alley, rain. People had walked through before we could lock it down. But the scarf... We bagged that fast. If she dropped it, sure, anyone who touched it after could be on there. But we logged everyone we knew had a reason. Officers, scene techs, family, boyfriend. None of them matched this profile. That leaves us with someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Which is where Avery comes in, the DI says. Exactly, Leah replies. We're not hanging a 30-year-old murder on a partial DNA hit alone, but it gives us a thread to pull. We need his history, his routines then, his routines now, any connection, however small, to Emily, her cafe, her route home. The plan crystallizes. First, confirm the science. Second, quietly check everything they can about Avery without tipping him off. Third, once they're confident, move in. Arrest, search, question. Contain the threat before the press gets even a whiff. Outside the briefing room, the city keeps moving, oblivious. Commuters wedge themselves into trains. Builders sweep dust off scaffolding. In a quiet cul-de-sac 30 minutes drive away, a man in his late 50s leaves his house, locking the door behind him out of pure habit, not knowing that a new pair of eyes is watching from a parked car at the end of the road. Surveillance starts soft, unmarked vehicles. Officers with takeaway cups and newspapers blending into the background. They watch Avery's morning routine. He loads tools into a van, checks his phone, lights a cigarette, cup of tea balanced on the roof while he ties down tarps. Then he drives off to his sights, leaving a smear of exhaust in the air. He looks like any other builder on any other gray London morning. High-vis jacket, sturdy boots, a slight stiffness in his walk that could be age or old injury. He nods to neighbors. One of them waves. Another hands him a parcel that was misdelivered. He thanks them, keys jingling in his hand as he climbs into the van. You sure this is our guy? One surveillance officer murmurs into his mic, voice low enough that only the car picks it up. He looks like someone's dad. The voice in his earpiece is Leah's. I don't care what he looks like, she says. DNA doesn't print faces. They trail him to a renovation job in a terraced house in Hackney, to a trade warehouse where he picks up plasterboard and bags of cement, to a chip shop where he eats lunch alone, head down, scrolling his phone. There's nothing obviously sinister about him. No late-night visits to Wasteland. No anonymous meetups under railway arches. Just work. Home. The occasional pint at a quiet pub where he watches football and keeps to himself. But predators know how to look like neighbors. The city has learned that lesson too many times to be fooled by high-vis and a polite nod. Back at the station, the background check deepens. Old tenancy records confirm he lived on Tallow Street in the mid-90s, a narrow, grimy road back then lined with shuttered shops and bedsits. From there, his route to the 1995 site takes him directly past the railway spoon every weekday morning. Witness statements from the cafe mention the builders who sometimes grab takeaway coffees, no names, no specifics, just a blur of men in dusty clothes, in and out in minutes. Could he have been one of them? Could he have watched Emily from across the counter, filed her away as part of his daily scenery, then one night decided she was something else? They pull every archived phone directory, every scrap of old data that might tie Avery to that part of East London. One entry surfaces. A call made to the cafe in September 1995 from a payphone near Tallow Street. No recording, of course. Just the number, the date, the time. Late afternoon. The manager remembers a dozen calls from some bloke asking about shifts back then. Could he say which one was Avery? No. But the card found years later in Avery's storage unit, the railway spoon with night shifts, ask for Emily, scrawled on the back. That card now looks less like a random scrap and more like a contact point. The card is dug out of the archive, bagged, tested again with modern methods. The ink is degraded, but they manage to confirm that the handwritten note is likely from a male, right-handed, average pressure. Nothing that screams Avery, but nothing that rules him out. They look at the old statements again. The top-floor neighbor who heard a car door. The anonymous "she's in the water" caller. The woman who saw a dark saloon with its boot open. Did anyone, anywhere, mention a name that sounded like his? They read and reread, eyes blurring, hunting for syllables that might have seemed meaningless in 1995 and radioactive now. Meanwhile, forensics runs further tests. Tiny cuttings from the scarf are analyzed again, targeting different loci, building out more of the male profile brick by brick. The match to Avery firms up, the probability climbing higher, still partial, still technically not perfect, but now well into the territory where senior officers use phrases like compelling evidence and lawyers start planning for the word reasonable in reasonable doubt. A meeting is called, high level, senior management, counsel from CPS, Leah, and her DI. At the end of the table, invited back for his history and his ghosts, Colin Mercer. On the screen at the far end, Emily's photo. Underneath, in clinical text, victim, case ref 95-1013 ward. The forensic lead talks them through the science. The partial profile, the database hit, the probability stats, the fact that the unknown male on the scarf can be linked to Avery to a degree that 30 years ago would have been considered science fiction. Could there be any innocent explanation, the superintendent asks, fingers steepled. Innocent? The forensic lead repeats. He would have had to be in physical contact with her scarf, not just brush past her in a crowd, grip, hold, knot, something like that. We have no record of him being a friend, a family member, a boyfriend. We have no plausible line of legitimate contact. Occam's razor applies. Occam's razor. The simplest explanation. A man who lived nearby, who walked past her workplace every day, whose DNA is now wrapped in the threads she wore around her throat, is likely the man who was there when she vanished. Is it enough to arrest? CPS counsel asks. Yes, Leah says before anyone else can. Enough to arrest, enough to search, enough to look him in the eye and ask him where he was on the 13th of October, 1995, and why his DNA is on a scarf from a crime scene he claims he never saw. What about charge? The superintendent presses. Leah doesn't flinch. We build to that, she says. We don't pretend we've wrapped it up on the strength of one report. We use this to crack him open and see what spills out. They argue risk, they argue media, they argue timing. In the end, the decision comes down with the weight of official language. Authorize arrest on suspicion of the kidnap and murder of Emily Ward. The paperwork moves. The warrants are drafted for his house, his van, his storage spaces, his devices. Teams are assembled. Armed response is briefed, just in case. You don't go through someone's front door on a 30-year-old murder without being ready for how badly they might want to stay on the other side. The operation launches early, just after dawn, when the world is still soft and half asleep. On Avery Street, a van pulls up quietly. Officers in plain clothes and tactical gear fan out. One watches the back, two take the sides. The lead officer steps up to the front door with the ram. Leah sits in a car 3 doors down, watching through the windscreen, heart thudding against her ribs. She hears the shout more than she sees it. "Police, open the door!" A beat, silence. Then the crash, wood splintering, the dull thud of the ram connecting with the lock, the door flies inward, shouts, footsteps, the small domestic sounds of a house being invaded by the past. Moments stretch. Then an officer appears at the door, radio pressed to his shoulder. "Target secured," he says. Male, late 50s, responsive, no immediate threat. A pause. Looks confused. Confused. They bring him out in handcuffs. He's barefoot, wearing a faded t-shirt and joggers. Hair mussed from sleep. For a brief second, he blinks into the light like a man who stepped out of his own normal morning into a different universe. Neighbors peer from behind curtains. Phones come up. A neighbor's teenage son films, eyes wide, content for later before he realizes what story he's captured. "Thomas Avery," the arresting officer says, voice firm, words recorded on a body cam. "I am arresting you on suspicion of the kidnap and murder of Emily Ward on or about the 13th of October, 1995. You do not have to say anything." The caution rolls out, smooth and practiced. Avery's lips part. A flicker of something crosses his face. Shock, anger, calculation, none of them sticking long enough to read. "Emily who?" He manages, voice hoarse. They put him in the back of a car, the door shuts, glass, steel, the click of a lock, a 30-year gap closed in one movement. Inside the house, the search begins. Drawers pulled, boxes opened, laptops bagged, phones seized, attic, loft, garage. Every inch of his life turned over. They bag clothing, old tools, an old set of keys on a ring that no longer seems to match any locks in the house. In a plastic tub in the loft, they find a jumble of old papers, receipts, flyers, business cards from the 90s. Among them, a familiar logo. The railway spoon. Same card, different copy. No writing this time. Just the phone number and address, creased in the middle as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. "Got you," one officer mutters to himself, dropping it into an evidence bag. In the interview room at the station, Avery sits alone for a moment, sipping water from a paper cup, staring at the blank wall opposite. The camera above the door records the small movements, the flex of his fingers, the slight tremor in his leg. He looks less like a monster and more like a cornered animal that hasn't yet decided whether to run or bite. The door opens. Leah walks in with a colleague and the duty solicitor. The tape, or now the digital recorder, rolls. "Interview commencing," she says, voice smooth, formal. "Present, Detective Sergeant Leah Grant, Detective Constable Harris, Duty Solicitor Mr. Kahn, and the suspect Thomas James Avery." She reads the caution again. He nods, says he understands. "Mr. Avery," she begins, sliding a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize this person?" He glances down. It's the standard shot of Emily, 19, frozen. The picture that seems to live on 1,000 surfaces now. His eyes flicker over it, then away. "No," he says, "never seen her." "This is Emily Ward," Leah says. "She disappeared on the 13th of October, 1995, from near a cafe called the Railway Spoon on Alder Lane. At the time, you lived less than a mile away and worked on a building site nearby. You walked past that cafe every day. You had their card in your possession." She lets the words build. "And now we have your DNA on a scarf recovered from the alley behind it. A scarf believed to have been taken from around her neck on the night she disappeared." Avery's jaw tightens. "I don't know anything about that," he says. "I never heard anyone. I don't remember any cafe. I was working all over the place back then. You can't pin some old missing person on me because your lab's got my spit from a fight 15 years ago." "It's not spit from a fight," Leah says evenly. "It's a partial profile from skin cells on wool fibers. A profile that matches yours to a probability of 1 in several million. That scarf came from the crime scene. How does your DNA get onto a 19-year-old girl's scarf if you never met her, Mr. Avery?" He swallows, glances at his solicitor, who leans in to murmur in his ear. After a beat, Avery looks back up. "No comment," he says. From then on, it's like pulling at a knot that tightens instead of loosening. Every question about 1995, about his routine, about whether he ever went into the cafe gets the same flat reply. No comment. They show him the tensely rebagged business card from the Railway Spoon found in his storage box. No comment. The mapping of his old address in relation to Alder Lane. No comment. The fact that he left that flat abruptly not long after Emily vanished. No comment. The record of him switching jobs within weeks. No comment. By the end of the interview, the room feels heavier, thick with the weight of all the words not said. Outside, news has already started to leak. A whisper to a journalist from a source close to the investigation. A camera crew picking up chatter outside the station. A tweet that shouldn't have gone out and can't be pulled back. The headline appears on a local site first, then spreads. London, 30-year cold case breakthrough. Man, 58, arrested over teen's disappearance. For the Ward family, the phone rings again. Another liaison officer, another carefully phrased update. A suspect has been arrested. There is DNA evidence. We can't say too much, not yet. We don't want to raise your hopes, but hope doesn't follow rules. It surges anyway, colliding with the old dread, the old ache. Emily's mother sits down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where Mercer once took notes while her tea went cold. Her hands shake, but her voice is steady when she asks the only thing that matters. Are you sure it's him? We're sure enough to have him in custody, the officer says. We're sure enough to search. We're sure enough to ask those questions. Sure enough, not the same as sure, not yet. On Alder Lane, cameras come back. Reporters stand where the candles once stood, gesturing at the alley like it's a set they've rented. Tonight, new developments in one of London's most haunting cold cases, a presenter intones. Locals walk past, some slowing, some speeding up. Old neighbors who remember the original nights feel the years peel away. Newer residents Google Emily Ward on their phones and discover they've been living on a ghost story. In the cold case office, Leah pins fresh photos to the board. Avery's modern mugshot, his house, his old flat on Tallow Street, now a nail salon with bright pink signage where the bedsit once was. Lines connect them to Emily's face, to the alley, to the scarf. The board looks, for the first time, less like a tangle and more like a net. Mercer stands beside her, arms crossed. His eyes linger on Avery's picture. Does he feel right to you? Leah asks quietly. Mercer exhales slowly. I've seen guilty men who look like choir boys, he says, and innocents who look like they'd strangle a stranger for breathing too loud. Feeling doesn't count for much in court, but he tilts his head, studying the lines. The routes, the job, the card, and that scarf. 30 years is a long time for coincidence to keep its balance. So you think we've got him? I think, Mercer says, that for the first time since '95, we're not chasing smoke. He pauses. Whether we can turn smoke into a body, into a charge, into a guilty verdict, that's another story. Outside the interview suite, outside the station, outside the narrow frame of the cameras, London keeps moving. Trains rattle past the old tracks near Alder Lane. The cafe, now with a new name and a new logo, serves flat whites to people who don't know they're sitting on a crime scene. Somewhere in a locked cabinet, the red scarf rests again, its threads now carrying not just old secrets, but fresh data, new weight. The title has already been written in a dozen newsrooms. London 30-year cold case solved. The packages are being cut. The dramatic reconstruction storyboarded. A quiet neighbor turned suspect. A breakthrough after decades. DNA as hero. Justice as inevitability. But inside the small, airless rooms where cases actually live or die, the question is still open, hanging heavy. Solved for the cameras is one thing. Solved in the cold language of a verdict, that's something else entirely. The headlines move faster than the facts. By the time the custody clock on Thomas Avery's arrest hits its first 12 hours, the phrase is already everywhere. Spoken, typed, whispered, shouted. London 30-year cold case solved? Question mark dangling like a noose. In the cold case office, the question mark is the part no one can ignore. On the board, above the map and the photos and the lines of string, Leah has written it in thick black pen next to Avery's name, as if to remind everyone that nothing is finished, nothing is settled, nothing is solved, until the word guilty comes out of a jury's mouth. The first interview bought them fragments. Avery's silence, his no comments, his flinch, almost imperceptible when Emily's photograph slid across the table. Nothing you could play as a confession, everything you could feel as resistance. So they go again. Second interview, different angle. Same room, same camera blink. He sits straighter this time, solicitor at his side, eyes a little harder, as if he's had a chance to rehearse his own version of innocence in the holding cell. Mr. Avery, Leah says, voice even, we're going to ask you more detailed questions about your life in 1995. Specifically, about your address on Tallow Street and your work on a building site near Alder Lane. No comment, he says automatically, as if the phrase has been lodged in his throat since the first interview and will only come out in that shape now. We've spoken to your former employer, Leah continues. We have records showing you were working on the Harrowman redevelopment project from July to November that year. We have your clock-in times. We know your route took you past the railway spoon twice a day. We've also recovered business cards from that cafe among your possessions. Can you explain that? His jaw tightens. No comment. You left that job a few weeks after Emily disappeared, she goes on. You moved out of Tallow Street not long after the police started knocking on doors near Alder Lane. You've told us you don't remember that cafe, that you don't recognize Emily, that you never went down that alley. But our evidence shows you were living and working on that street at the time she vanished, and now we've found a DNA match between you and her scarf. Are you still saying you never met her? His solicitor leans in again, murmuring advice. Avery's eyes stay on the table. For a second, his fingers twitch, as if they want to reach for something that isn't there. Cigarette. Tool, handle, throat. No comment, he repeats. They shift tactics, bring in old photos of Tallow Street, of the building site, Of the cafe's interior in 95, laminated menu on the wall, formica tables, steam from the coffee machine curling into the air. Do these places look familiar? Leah asks. He glances. A muscle jumps in his cheek. Looks like half of East London back then, he says. Everything was gray and falling apart. I worked a lot of jobs. I don't remember every bloody cafe I got a bacon roll from. So you do remember going in? She snaps, catching the slip. His solicitor's hand lands on his arm. Avery's mouth opens, closes. No comment, he says again, but it's softer now. Less armor, more habit. They play him the faint audio recording of the anonymous "she's in the water" call, the distorted voice, the 3 words that dragged divers into the canal all those years ago. It's not cleaned up enough to make an ID, it never was. But sometimes people recognize themselves in the sound of their own sin. Is this you? Leah asks. He listens. His eyes flicker. No, he says. No comment has fled for a moment. That's not me. I never called anyone. She files away the never, the certainty, the way he reacts more strongly to that accusation than to the idea of his DNA on a dead girl's scarf. After an hour, the solicitor calls for a break. They step out, leaving Avery alone with his reflection in the dark glass. For a moment, his shoulders sag. Then he straightens, scrubs a hand over his face, sets his jaw again. When they come back in, the wall has gone up higher. No comment, he says before they've even asked the next question. Outside the room, the evidence machine chews on his life. Every tool in his van is swabbed. Every jacket in his wardrobe. Every pair of boots, old or new. Forensics compares patterns, fibers, microscopic traces against what little they have from the alley. It's a long shot. Rain and time ate most of that crime scene years ago. But they try. Digital forensics pulls his phone apart. Messages, call logs, search history. Nothing leaps out. No late-night obsession with the case. No saved articles. If he ever Googled Emily Ward, he did it on a device long gone. Or he never needed to. Some men carry their crimes in their heads like trophies, not on screens. They dig into his past relationships. A girlfriend in the late 90s who left after 6 months, describing him as moody, controlling, but not violent. A woman from a pub who remembers him as all right until he drank too much, then he got grabby, hands everywhere. No charges filed, no formal complaints, just stories. Atmosphere. An old neighbor from Tallow Street, tracked down in a retirement flat, remembers him as the builder lad who came and went at odd hours, kept to himself, had a temper though, heard him shouting once, something got smashed. I didn't stick my nose in, didn't back then, did we? When they mention Emily's name, she shivers. That poor girl, she says. We all thought it was that funny bloke with the dog. Malcolm, was it? Never thought it'd be the normal one. Normal. The word follows him like a shadow. On a hunch, Leah asks forensics to cross-check Avery's DNA against other unsolved cases from the 90s. Strangulations, alley attacks, bodies near tracks, the old whispers of a railway ripper that once filled the tabloids. The system whirs, compares, spits out a series of negatives. No match on those bodies. No neat pattern of multiple murders tied up with one neat bow. Just the one cold scarf and the one old alley for now. Still, a single link can be enough to bring a man down, if they can wrap enough around it. In a cramped CPS office with walls the color of old paperwork, prosecutors shuffle through the ward file and the fresh forensic reports. Leah sits opposite them, adrenaline masked under professionalism. We have a partial DNA profile from the scarf that matches him, she says. We have his proximity to the cafe and the scene, his possession of the cafe's card with Emily's name, his sudden move after the disappearance, his complete lack of any plausible, innocent explanation for how his DNA got onto her clothing. It's circumstantial but combined. It's strong. The senior prosecutor, glasses halfway down his nose, taps the file. It's also 30 years old, he says. No body, no eyewitness, no confession, no clear forensic evidence placing her in his home or vehicle. A defense barrister will stand up and say, yes, my client's DNA is on the scarf. Maybe he brushed against her in the cafe. Maybe he picked it up when he saw it on the ground, thought about handing it in, thought better of it. Maybe the profile got there through secondary transfer, back when every officer and lab tech in London handled exhibits without the protocols we have now. Are you going to hang a man on a maybe? We don't have brushing levels of contact, Leah replies firmly. We have concentrated DNA near the knot, the part that would have been in his hands if he grabbed it, if he tightened it, if he pulled it away. He arches a brow. We have interpretative science and probabilities. We do not have footage of his hands doing any of that. Jurors like stories they can see. Mercer, sitting slightly back, clears his throat. With respect, he says, voice quiet but carrying weight. If we wait for the kind of stories jurors like, we might as well shutter half the cold case unit. The question is there a realistic alternative explanation for his DNA on that scarf, given everything else we know? I spent a long time in that alley in 95. No one came forward to say they'd picked the scarf up. No one mentioned any stranger handing anything in. If he touched it without telling us. That means he was there when he had no reason to be. That's not nothing. Silence hangs for a moment. The prosecutor studies him, then looks down again at the pages, at the grainy photo, at the words unresolved stamped on old reports. Public interest is high, he says finally. The family deserve an answer. The file deserves its day in court. But we don't take a case because of sympathy and optics. We take it because we think there is a reasonable prospect of conviction. He flips to the DNA report again, to the probability numbers, to the phrase, compelling support for the proposition the DNA originated from Avery. I think you've just about got me there, he says at last. But you'll need more. Any pattern of stalking behavior, any witness who remembers him in that cafe with her, any inconsistency in his account that we can hang cross-examination on, and you need to brace yourself for this. If he stands in that dock and says, I don't know how my DNA got there, but I didn't do it, and they don't feel the weight you feel, he walks. And he doesn't just walk from this, he walks with a story about being wrongly accused after 30 years. That sticks. Leah nods, throat tight. So we tighten it, she says. We find more. They go back to the beginning again, but with new eyes. Old cafe staff are tracked down. A woman who worked there briefly in '95 now runs a bakery in Brighton. She remembers the builders, remembers one of them being chatty, calling her darling and asking if she was on after dark. Was that Avery? She squints at his photo, sees more of an old man than the younger version. Could be, she says. They all looked like that back then. Dusty, tired, cocky. Another ex-staff member remembers something sharper. There was one bloke, he says slowly, came in most mornings, sat near the counter, just watching, staring a bit too long. Em would roll her eyes when he left, said he gave her the creeps, but she didn't want to make a scene, said, it's just some builder, I can handle it. We told her to be careful walking home. She'd just laugh. He looks at the photo, his mouth goes dry. Yeah, he whispers, that's him, 30 years older, but that's the same set of his face when he told her he'd walk her home sometime. She told him, my boyfriend would love that, and he didn't like it. It's not hard evidence, but it's a thread, another line from his life into hers. They find an old notebook from the cafe, preserved more by accident than design, stuck in a box of unrelated admin. In one margin, next to a list of regulars shorthand, T2 Sug, bacon roll guy in suit, someone has scribbled, creep in high-vis again, 8:30, stared. No name, no date, just a mood on paper, just a flicker. All of it goes into the file, into the bundle, into the story they'll have to tell in that wood-paneled room. Custody hours tick down. They need to either charge or release. CPS gives the thin, formal nod. There is enough, just enough. The bar is met, the risk is taken. In the charge room, under strip light and CCTV, an officer reads the words aloud. Thomas James Avery, you are charged with the kidnap and murder of Emily Ward on or about the 13th day of October, 1995. He stands, hands at his sides, shoulders squared. Something in his face closes, like a door being pushed shut from the inside. Did you hear and understand the charge? The officer asks. He stares straight ahead. Yeah, he says, I heard you. No one says the next part out loud, but it's there in the air. And? No confession, no shout, no denial big enough to echo just that one tight syllable. Yeah. The news breaks fully now. Question mark gone. Quiet neighbor charged over London 30-year cold case. Photos of the alley, the cafe, the red scarf recreated, not the real one, flash across screens. Commentators talk about closure and justice delayed. The Ward family's front door becomes a siege point again. Cameras, microphones, strangers asking them how they feel about a man they've never met being accused of destroying their lives. Emily's mother stands once on the doorstep, clutching the photo to her chest. Her voice is steady, controlled, like someone walking a tightrope in a storm. They say they've found the man who took my daughter, she says. If that's true, I want him to face what he's done. I want the truth, not a story, not a maybe. The truth, that's all. The trial is months away, but already the story has shape. DNA, alley, cold case cracked. But in the quiet that comes after the first explosion of coverage, the doubts creep in. The defense team begins their own story building. They hire their own experts. They pull their own threads. Secondary transfer, contamination, memory decay, witness reliability. They will put every weakness of a 30-year gap on the table and shine a harsh, unforgiving light on it. Leah knows this. Mercer knows it. The whole team feels it every time they look at the board. We got what we wanted, one officer says one evening, exhausted. We said we wanted a suspect, a charge, a path to court. We've got it. Yeah, Leah says. Now we find out if that's the same thing as the truth. At night, when the building is quieter and the hum of printers finally dies down, she stands in front of the board alone. Lights low, faces grainy in the half-dark. Emily in the center, eyes forever 19. Avery off to one side, frozen in that custody still. Between them, lines, dates, questions. She thinks about certainty, how everyone watching the news wants it wrapped up. Wants the story to snap shut like a book. Wants to believe that a name and a charge and a set of dates on the bottom of a court listing equal solved. But she also thinks about the scarf. about the tiny cells embedded in its fibers, clinging on for decades just to say one small stubborn thing. He was here, not he killed her, not he acted alone, not this is why, just he was here. Sometimes that's all you get. On Alder Lane, the alley looks the same. Night drops into it early. The air is damp. If you stand at the spot where the scarf was found and listen hard, you can hear the rumble of trains, the distant thud of music from the bar that replaced the old pub, the faint buzz of neon from the cafe's new sign. If you didn't know better, you'd think nothing had ever happened here at all. But somewhere between the bricks and the memory of a girl who never came home, the city is waiting for a verdict, for an answer, for the moment when someone, somewhere, can finally say whether London's 30-year cold case is truly solved, or whether, even with a neighbor in the dock and DNA on a scarf, the real story is still hiding in that 90-second strip of darkness between cameras, refusing to come all the way into the light. The word trial lands with a weight that feels both inevitable and unreal. For 30 years, the Ward case has lived in files and half-remembered news clips, in the private geography of grief mapped across a few streets of East London. Now it has a date, a courtroom number, a judge's name, a timetable as if you can schedule justice like you schedule a delivery. On the listing sheet at Crown Court, the line looks brutally small. Regina V. Avery, murder of Emily Ward. The corridors outside are not small. They're wide and echoing, full of footsteps and nerves. On the first morning, reporters cluster near the entrance, lenses and microphones ready. The phrase, London 30-year cold case solved, runs on the rolling news banners at the bottom of screens. The question mark shaved off for effect. The story is already written in their heads. Quiet builder, clever DNA, city finally at peace. Inside, the air tastes different. Drier, heavier. The courtroom is almost theatrical in its order. Judge's bench, dock, counsel benches, public gallery. A place built to hold stories and strip them down to facts. Thomas Avery stands in the dock, flanked by officers. He's been there for preliminary hearings, but today is different. Today, 12 strangers will file into the jury box and be asked to decide whether he is a killer or a scapegoat. He wears a plain shirt, collar stiff, hair freshly cut. On another man, you might call it smart. On him, it looks like armor someone else picked out. Emily's mother sits in the front row of the public gallery, liaison officer at her side. She clutches a small photograph, fingers pressed white along the edge. Not the large frame picture she showed the cameras on the doorstep, a smaller one, worn, like something carried in a wallet. Emily leaning against a railing, squinting into the sun, hair tangled by wind, alive in a way no courtroom portrait could make her. Behind her, further along the bench, sits a man who doesn't quite know where to put his hands. Colin Mercer. Retired or not, he couldn't stay away. The case has been his shadow for 3 decades. He watches the dock with eyes that have seen too many defendants to be easily fooled and too many miscarriages to easily trust. On the other side of the room, Leah sits at the prosecution bench, files stacked neatly in front of her, pen lined up parallel to the edge. She's not the one on her feet. This is counsel's arena now. But the case is still hers, in the way that matters. She feels every look, every shift in the room like a change in pressure. The judge enters, everyone rises, the ritual words are spoken, the indictment is read. Thomas James Avery, you are charged that on a day between the 12th and the 14th of October 1995, you did murder Emily Ward. How do you plead? The courtroom holds its breath. Not guilty, he says, voice flat, no tremor. The words fall into the air and hang there like a dare. The jury is sworn, a mix of faces, ages, lives, people who were children when Emily vanished, people who remember 95 as a blur of Britpop and cheap lager, people who, until this week, moved through a city full of alleys without knowing one of them ate a girl and kept silent. Prosecution first. The Crown's barrister, a woman with a calm, cutting voice, rises. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to. Silence stretches in front of her like a red carpet. Members of the jury, she begins, this is a case about a gap of 90 seconds on a grainy CCTV tape in an alley in East London, a gap in a young woman's walk home, a gap of 30 years in a family's life, and a gap in a man's story that modern science has finally stepped into. She lays it out, carefully, methodically, the late shift at the railway spoon, the red scarf, the alley, the disappearance, the investigation that went cold, the box in the evidence room, the re-examination of the scarf, the partial male DNA profile, the match to Avery, his home, his work, his roots in 1995, the cafe card with Emily's name, his silence when asked how his DNA could have reached her clothes. This is not a case, she says, of a stranger whose path happened to cross hers once in a crowded cafe. This is a case of a man whose hands were on the knot of her scarf, a man who had no reason to be there. A man who left her family to live in the dark for 30 years, believing their daughter had simply vanished, when in fact, she met him. The words land like hammer blows. The defense follows with something softer, almost conversational. Their barrister, silver-haired, voice smooth, smiles at the jury as if inviting them into a story by the fireside. This is an old case, he says. Old memories, old evidence, old assumptions. We are not here to decide whether this is a tragedy. It is. We are not here to decide whether the police did their best. They did what they could then, and they're doing what they can now. We are here for one question only. Has the Crown proved, so that you can be sure, that this man, he gestures lightly toward the dock, took that girl's life? He leans on the wooden bench, hands open. They will tell you that a partial DNA profile lifted from a scarf left in an alley 30 years ago is enough to answer that question. They will tell you that because science has given them a number, a probability, they can now roll back time and point to a single man and say, he did it. He lets silence gather for a second. But science, like memory, is only as good as its limits. That scarf was handled by how many people? Bagged, unbagged, moved, stored, reopened, tested with techniques that did not exist when the evidence was collected. The chain is long. Every link is an opportunity for error. He nods toward the public gallery. You will feel for Mrs. Ward. Only a stone wouldn't. But sympathy is not proof. Fear is not proof. Headlines are not proof. You took an oath to try this case on evidence, not emotion. And when you strip away the drama, you will see what remains. No body, no eyewitness, no confession, no clear forensic link to any place where Emily Ward was killed. Indeed, no proof that she was killed. Just a partial match on a piece of wool left in a dirty alley in a city full of strangers. He smiles again. Sometimes the right answer to a terrible question is, we don't know. The battle lines are drawn. Witnesses first. The court is walked back through 95, one voice at a time. The cafe manager, older now, hands shaking a little as he describes Emily's last shift. How she laughed, how she put on her scarf, how he waved without looking up, never imagining that tiny, lazy gesture would live in his bones for decades. Former staff talk about the alley, about how normal it was to cut through, about the man in high-vis who watched a little too long, asked for night shifts. He creeped her out, one of them says, eyes flicking between Avery and the jury. She didn't want to make a fuss, but she said he made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Do you see that man in court today? The prosecutor asks. He hesitates. Years of blurred faces, thickened waists, thinned hair, but some lines never change. Jaw, eyes, the way the mouth sits when it isn't speaking. I think it's him, the witness says quietly, pointing. I can't swear it, but I think it is. The defense pounces. You think, the barrister says, putting air quotes around the word with his tone. Nearly 30 years later, after seeing his face in the news, after hearing about his arrest, are you sure you are remembering him and not the story you've been told? The witness wilts a little. I don't know. It just feels like him. Feels, the barrister repeats, turning to the jury. Not a word science uses, not a word you should base a conviction on. Neighbors from Tallow Street take the stand. One describes him as quiet, bit odd, kept to himself. Another shrugs, says he was just another renter, but remembers the shouting once, the smashed glass. Nobody called the police. You didn't back then. You closed your curtains and turned up the TV. The top floor woman from Alder Lane testifies about the night of the disappearance, the car door sound, the dark saloon, the open boot. She admits she didn't see his face. The prosecution doesn't pretend she did. They just let her describe the timing, the hush, the feeling that something didn't belong. Then come the officers, men and women in suits, evidence tags, in their language, walking the jury through the skeleton of the investigation. The first attending PC, the original SIO, scene of crime officers, the lab tech from 95, explaining the limitations of the time in words the jury can hold, degraded samples, partial profiles, no national database then like now. Finally, forensics. Patel in the witness box, sober, precise, the scarf's second life in their hands. They show the jury a photograph of the exhibit. Not the real scarf, its fibers are too precious now, but a high-resolution image projected on a screen. The red looks almost bright there, artificial. Something that belonged in a clothing advert, not an evidence bag. Patel explains the reanalysis, the care taken, the controls used, the repeated runs to rule out contamination, the shared markers with Avery's reference sample. Numbers appear on the screen, graphs of peaks and alleles boiled down into phrases like probability of a random match less than 1 in several million. So when you say, the prosecutor asks, that this DNA profile is strongly supportive of it originating from Mr. Avery, what do you mean in plain language? In plain language, Patel says, we are saying that the likelihood of this profile belonging to someone other than Mr. Avery, who is unrelated to him by chance, is extremely low. It is possible in the abstract. It is highly improbable in reality. The defense circles their own expert challenges, assumptions. Was the sample low level? Could there have been multiple contributors? Could the extra amplification needed to read it have introduced artifacts? Could the DNA have been transferred to the scarf after it was collected, mishandled in some evidence room, touched by someone who had touched Avery? Patel holds his ground. We have found no evidence of contamination in our controls, he repeats. We are confident the DNA is from contact with the scarf at or before the time it entered the chain of evidence, and given where on the scarf it was concentrated, our interpretation is that it represents direct handling of that area. But you cannot, the defense barrister presses, tell this jury when that contact occurred, how long it lasted, or in what context it happened, can you? No, Patel admits. DNA cannot tell you the story. It can only tell you who was there. That sentence lands in the pit of Leah's stomach. It's the truth, and it's also the crack the defense will wedge their whole case into. When it's the family's turn, the room shifts. The law makes allowances here, gentler questions, a different tone, but the impact is still sharp. Emily's mother describes the night she didn't come home, the knock on the door, the years of not knowing, the empty chair, the unopened letters from universities she never attended, the birthdays with one candle instead of 19, 20, 30. Do you believe she is dead? The prosecutor asks softly. Yes, she says, no wavering, no drama, just a flat, heavy fact. If she were alive, she would have called, she would have come, someone would have seen her. This city eats you up, but it doesn't hide you that long. He hid her. The defense does not cross-examine her on that. Even they have limits. They simply nod, expression grave, as if to say, we all agree it's terrible. That doesn't mean our client did it. Days stack up, evidence piles, words accumulate. The story the Crown tells is clear. A builder who noticed a girl on his route, who made her uncomfortable, who learned her patterns, who waited for a quiet night, a dark alley, a 90-second blind spot, who used a scarf to control her, bundle her, move her, who put her in a car and drove into the city's shadows, who dumped her where no search found her, who moved on, job to job, life to life, carrying his secret like a stone in his pocket. The defense story is simpler, gaps, uncertainty, no body, no time of death, no scene. A scarf in an alley that could have been touched by anyone, a man whose DNA happened to land there through means nobody can prove either way. A city that, 30 years later, wants an answer so badly it's prepared to turn a maybe into a verdict. When Avery takes the stand, because in the end he does, the whole room leans in without meaning to. He adjusts the microphone, looks smaller than he did in the dock, or maybe it's just the framing. Mr. Avery, his counsel begins gently, did you kill Emily Ward? No, he says. First time he's denied it directly in public. No, I did not. Did you ever meet her? Not that I remember, he replies. I might have seen her serving in that cafe. I went in for tea, bacon roll, like half the lads on site did, but I never spoke to her, not properly. I didn't follow her. I didn't go down that alley. Do you have any explanation for why your DNA would be found on her scarf? He hesitates. It's the big question, the one that sits like a spotlight between them all. I don't know, he says at last. All I can think is I must have handled it if it was left somewhere. Maybe I picked it up, meant to hand it in, forgot. Maybe I grabbed it off a chair in the cafe without thinking, moved it. It was 30 years ago. I don't remember every bloody scarf I've ever touched. But I never hurt that girl. The prosecutor comes at him like a slow rising tide, not loud, not angry, just relentless. You say you don't remember picking up a scarf, but you're certain you didn't hurt her, she says. How is it that one memory is so clear and the other so conveniently hazy? Because I'd remember killing someone, he snaps, a flash of temper cracking through the calm. I'd remember dragging her into an alley like you lot keep saying. I'd remember putting my hands on her like that. I didn't. You left your room on Tallow Street soon after she disappeared. You left your job. You didn't come forward when the police were knocking on doors asking for help. I moved for work, he insists. Jobs end. Rents go up. That's life. I didn't know anything that could help. I thought it was just one of those sad things you read about. I didn't know they'd come for me 30 years later with some lab report and act like it's a time machine. He says it so bitterly that for a second in the gallery, someone shifts in their seat. People want clean villains. He doesn't sound clean. He sounds tired, cornered, angry. You had a card from the railway spoon with Emily's name on it, the prosecutor says. How do you explain that? He glances at the jury, then away. I don't know, he mutters. People used to scribble on things all the time. Phone numbers, names, maybe someone gave it to me when I was looking for work. Maybe she wrote it, I don't remember. 30 years, for God's sake. Convenient, she says again. He glares. No, human. The exchange leaves a chill in the room. It's messy, real. The kind of interaction that doesn't fit neatly into either side's narrative. When he steps down, the case has no confession, no sudden revelation. Just more words layered on top of old ones, more possible readings of the same handful of facts. At the end, in closing, the prosecutor narrows everything to a sharp point. You do not have to be certain of every detail to be sure of the essential truth, she tells the jury. You don't know exactly where he took her after that alley, but you know he was there. His DNA tells you that. You don't know exactly how he killed her, but you know she never came back, and no trace of her life appears anywhere after his hands touched her scarf. Alone, each piece might be explainable. Together they are not. This is not bad luck. This is not coincidence. This is not contamination. This is guilt. The defense counters with their own knife edge. If you can sit in that jury room and say, hand on heart, that you have no doubt, he says softly, not even a reasonable one, then by all means convict him. But if there is a part of you that thinks maybe the DNA was transferred later, maybe someone else used that alley, maybe she met a different danger that night and this is just a tragic overlap, then you must not put a guilty label on a man's entire life to fill a gap the evidence cannot honestly fill. And then it's out of their hands. The judge gives directions on law, burden of proof, reasonable doubt, how to treat circumstantial evidence, how to weigh expert testimony, how to navigate the pull of sympathy without letting it drag them away from the standard they swore to uphold. The jury files out, 12 lives paused, 12 minds carrying 30 years of weight into a small room with a long table and a stack of exhibits. In the emptying courtroom, Emily's mother sits very still, photograph in her lap, knuckles white. Mercer stares at the closed jury door as if he could will it open with the right word. Leah gathers her papers with hands that suddenly feel clumsy, the edges of the files catching at her skin. In the dock, Avery sits down again. For the first time since he arrived, he looks somewhere other than his own feet or the judge. He looks up at the public gallery, at the woman holding the photograph of the girl whose name has tangled his life. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second before he looks away. Outside, the news channels are already on standby. Graphics primed, presenters rehearsing 2 versions, guilty at last and shock acquittal in cold case trial. The city carries on around them, trains rattling, coffees poured, alleys filling and emptying with footsteps. Inside, time thickens. The 90 seconds that once swallowed Emily stretch into hours of deliberation. The question that has haunted Alder Lane for 30 years is now framed in slightly different words, but it's the same at its core. What happened in that dark gap, and who, if anyone, can we be sure enough to blame for it?